right, so anyways, that's where I like fingers during intercourse. But
that was a good point. That was a really very intellectual, astute observation.
Oh, thank you very much. Hello, everybody, or as I would like to say, Hallo Zusammen, which is a German, because I am a Nazi.
Oh, really?
Yeah, actually.
Oh, wow. John, when did this happen?
Well, I don't know. You know, it's like there's this collapse of the Greater Germanic Reich, and I was just like, man, I got to take up the lost cause on this one.
Wow.
I mean, if they've got a lost cause for the Confederacy, I mean, there's got to be some other white supremacist movements out there there's a lost cause for, right? You know,
That's very true.
And I'm like, hey, look, I got this skin. I can't just let it go nowhere, right? You know,
you got to make use of it, dude.
Yeah.
Well, with that lovely introduction, welcome back to our podcast. We're officially now dubbed the One More Podcast. My name is Yuval Parker, and I'm here with the great and powerful
John.
Hello, John.
Should I do a last name too?
I mean, the Zach and Blake didn't do a last name, so
okay. Well, I'll go by an alias. My name is Jahan Patterson.
John Pooterson.
No, Jahan Patterson.
Oh, my bad. All right.
No, you're good.
All right, Jahan Patterson.
Patterson.
Patterson. That's very good.
Oh, it's because if you're at a math and science team thing, and everyone else there is like South Asian or East Asian, and they're like, there can't be like a white name here. That's just too far out there. It's just it doesn't work.
It's got to be a little more diverse, more ethnic.
Mm-hmm.
Well, anyways, welcome back, everybody. This is kind of a podcast type discussion, open platform. John, I don't know if I really explained to you what specifically we'd be doing on here.
I mean, you mentioned there'd be something about just like talking about the issues of our day. Right?
Yeah. So
now, I'm sorry to interrupt,
no,
but you said that the title, the name of this podcast is what? The One More Podcast?
Yeah. Hey man, let's do one more podcast.
Okay.
Yeah. So
original.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Honestly, when I was thinking about different names and stuff like this, there is a lot of, at least this one, the One More Podcast. There's like the Just One More Tip or something like that, or there's a few others that were like.
So long as you didn't go with just the tip.
Yeah, exactly. That would have been not good at all. That would have been a very difficult
because you want to go full shaft there.
Yo, we go in deep in this podcast.
Yeah.
But yeah, so pretty much this is just kind of an open platform to talk about stuff that's affecting our lives, and I know last podcast we were talking about like movies and music and kind of stuff that at least I tried to steer the direction where it's like this is where I was before and this is how I am now, and I think we went a little light on the conversations, and I'm not looking for like a hey man, I want you to be crying at the end of this podcast. We need to break some.
I'm already at Waterworks right now, so
we need to do some Goodwill Hunting, breaking you down. But
so you mentioned movies, and I suppose I mean there's plenty of stuff to talk about.
Sure,
but in terms of what's just coming to my mind right now, you mentioned movies, and it's sort of like say, hey, don't think about elephants. Boom.
Yeah, no, of course, no, yeah, dude. Let's talk about some movies for a little bit.
All right, so it's not a movie actually, is what I was thinking of. It's a TV series or a Netflix series. So you've been watching any of the Marvel Netflix series on?
Daredevil, I'm on season 1, and I've been on season 1 for about 3 years now.
Nice. So you're making your way through.
I'm making your way through slowly. I know that they're doing the Marvel Defenders and stuff like that, and I think because I really wanted to watch Luke Cage. It's Iron Fist, Luke Cage, Jessica Jones, and Daredevil, right?
Right.
Yeah, so Daredevil and Luke Cage were probably the ones that I were most interested in. But what were you going to say?
You should really check out Jessica Jones. I was actually very pleasantly surprised by that.
Really?
Yeah. It's first off, it's thematically fantastic. In terms of its tone and what it deals with in terms of themes. It's actually a very good. It's actually really good at conveying a story that we don't actually get a lot in media, which is abuse stories, right?
Okay.
So you actually see Jessica Jones, which is played by Kristen Ritter, dealing with the aftermath of basically being in an abusive relationship. I don't want to spoil it all too much as to what happens in there.
Hey, John, I'm going to interrupt you real quick. I need you to be talking into the mic more.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're good. Don't apologize.
Yeah, so let me try and fix this.
Adjust it. Make some noise. There it is.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm seeing it good.
Okay, great. But so it's a very good abuse story. Well, I don't want to say good as in the sense of, like it's a
Are you advocating for abuse?
Yes, yeah. This is the 1950s. But I like my misogyny out and blatant and in the open.
There you go.
So no, but it's a good show.
Uh-huh.
I would highly recommend watching it if you haven't already.
Okay.
But really, in terms of what I wanted to talk about with regards to the Defenders is,
Sure.
I've already watched Daredevil seasons 1 and 2. I've watched Jessica Jones. I've watched Luke Cage.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I also watched the Defenders, but I didn't watch all of Iron Fist.
Okay.
Right? So I think it was like, I got about halfway through the season of Iron Fist, right?
Okay.
And there was one scene in particular where I had to stop and I had to be like, no, I can't watch this anymore, right?
Like, good or bad? Like it was just too good, you had to take a break, or like it was really bad, I'm done with the show?
It wasn't bad in the sense of just like, oh my god, this sucks, but it was like, I can't buy the concept, right?
Oh, okay.
And here's the thing, like, you live in a universe, so it's set in the same universe as Marvel's The Avengers or whatever and whatnot, like, and they explicitly reference that. Like,
Sure.
they talk about Tony Stark, the green guy, which is obviously the Hulk.
Right.
They mention all the Avengers by some other, euphemism or epithet or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Green guy, you got a magic hammer, which is
Thor, sure,
right?
Sure.
And then who's the last Avenger? Captain America.
Captain
They goes
America.
the big dude with a shield is what
Yeah.
I think that you say in Luke Cage. But so even in a world where they have like aliens coming out of the sky and shit or whatever, there's this one thing that I couldn't buy as a fucking premise, right? And it's not even like the suspension of disbelief type thing where they're like, there's a lot of times where you just got to be like, okay, yeah, you think that in a universe where they saw literally a fucking portal open up to another dimension and have like aliens and shit come out of it, that these people would understand that, yeah, we live in a world where, the rules of physics that we in this world abide by probably don't apply to everybody.
Right.
You think there'd be exceptions to the rule.
Right.
But there is like this one scene in Iron Fist about, I think it's episode 7, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not entirely sure, but I think it's 7. But I was just like, nope, I'm done. I can't buy this concept anymore. Because, okay, so here's the thing.
Just go ahead and spoil it for me.
Okay,
Hey,
okay.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert ahead here.
I mean, Iron Fist has been out for what? How many years?
It's been out for almost a year now.
A year now. Yeah. If you haven't seen, then you don't care.
Yeah. I mean, trust me when I say this. Just go find some summary of it on YouTube. It's not that great. Like, right. I'm sorry to Finn Jones or whatever the dude's name is. He was all right in the Defenders, but in Iron Fist, the writing.
Lay it on me. What happened?
Right. So in Daredevil, you see Matt Murdock, who's Daredevil. Yeah. You see him getting laid, right? Okay. So you see him banging Elektra. You see him banging what's her face, Karen or whatever, or not. I mean, he at least makes out with her. Okay. And it's implied that they probably fucked, right? Okay. Yeah. I mean, like, he's blind. He's working that whole angle of, oh, I can't see, and it's like, I think you're beautiful for who you are, and it's like, like what girl is not gonna go for that? Plus, he looks like Charlie Cox or whatever his name is. Like, come on, he's,
come on, man.
But he's working that whole blind angle. So when he's having his sex scenes with Elektra,
I mean, they don't show anything in the show, do they? Or they just allude to it?
I mean, like, you see. I mean, it's not like there's like.
Do you see butts?
You see butts.
You see butts.
There's not like naked boobies. But you most certainly do see, whoever plays Elektra Nachos, she's not wearing a top or whatever.
She's a good-looking woman.
Yeah. And there's a particularly erotic scene in there.
Okay. Wait, is this in Daredevil or in
this is in Daredevil?
Okay, all right.
And she's, again, it's not like it's softcore porn or anything.
Sure.
But it is very much erotic.
Well, okay, get to Iron Fist.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Why are you explaining Daredevil?
I'm trying to give you some context here. So
I don't need context. Just jump into it. Raw dog it right now.
So when I watch Matt Murdock, doing his thing, I was like, okay, yeah, I could buy this. Him having sex. It's just one thing that you could do. Right. Jessica Jones, right? Her backstory is she is a hard drinking survivor of an abusive relationship. And when you see her, having sex with a character in her show, you can believe it, right?
Well, hold on. What's her superpower though?
She's super strong.
Oh, okay, that's it.
Yeah,
You just like can crush people and
pretty much, yeah.
Okay, all right.
And in my mind, it's just like, okay, I could buy that, right?
Mm.
Like she's in. Not to say that all abuse survivors are like this, but a lot of abuse survivors do tend to be sexually active after
Sure.
their abuse.
Psychology aside, go ahead.
Psychology aside, but so when I see Jessica Jones having her sex scenes, I can buy that.
Sure.
Luke Cage, I mean, okay, come on,
He's a good-looking guy.
he's a good-looking guy. He's black, right? That's points right there, right? And he was married, so like that this dude has had to have had sex before, right?
Sure.
Okay, so when I see his sex scenes, I can totally buy it.
Wait, do they all have sex scenes?
They all do, but
Are you serious?
Yeah, but here's my thing, right?
Yeah.
So with Iron Fist, Danny Rand is a kid who disappeared to another dimension at age 10 before he hit fucking puberty.
Uh-huh.
He's living in a monastic order in another dimension where there are no women,
Okay.
right? And he's living in an order called the Chaste, and then he comes out and then he has a sex scene, and I'm like, why are you cutting to black? Like, he's gonna nut in 15 seconds, right? Like I was like, why are you doing? Like, the closest thing I've seen this kid do to beat off was get beat with sticks, right? I mean, like, come on.
Yeah.
So I can't buy. I was just like, God damn, I gotta put this down, right?
Man, hold on. So out of all the story and plot devices and everything that they use, him having sex is what throws you out of it. Is what totally breaks the reality, breaks the illusion, breaks whatever's going on in the show. You're just like, nope, doesn't make sense. I'm done.
That was the straw that broke the camel's back, right? I was just like, all right, well, the writing on this is kind of whatever. Him doing his what. Okay, he's gonna focus his chi. I'm like, why you got a yellow fist? You probably should have some fucking blue balls or something. Like. Anyways, but that was just, I was just like, all right, this is an okay show, right?
Sure.
It wasn't. I was like, maybe I just got to give it some time. Maybe it's like a wine, right? Maybe
Okay.
I got to let it age a little bit.
Sure.
And then they're like, nope, everyone's gonna have a sex scene. You're just gonna have to deal with it. I'm like, you did nothing to earn that, right? Like, you're gonna tell me that this prepubescent dude is gone for 15 years. He gets smacked around by sticks, living amongst monks with no women,
Yeah.
right? And then he's going to be, just like, oh, yeah. And they have the next scene. It's like, last night was really nice. It's like, yeah, it was really nice. And the chick's all into it. It's like, last night was nice for me, too. I was like, no, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. I'd be surprised if he even got it in you, he probably
John, I love how you're so just that's what makes or breaks the show for you. If it doesn't have a realistic sex plot line, if it doesn't have a realistic human aspect to it, that's what it's not that there's the story sucks. It's the sex sucks. I love that.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
yeah. Well, the story was kind of blah anyways.
Oh, okay.
So I was just like, all right, this is a good time for me to stop, right?
This is a good time. I'm leaving.
I mean, this would be a good time for the writers to stop and be like, should we give him a sex scene? They'd be like, nah. But no, they fucking did it anyways. And I was like, nah, I can't handle this now.
I am donezo.
I'm donezo.
Well, I'm glad that you were able to ramble on about that, because I don't know if I personally, I would have just been like, the sex was bad, doom, that's it. But I'm really glad that you can go in depth and understand all the complexities of what makes a good sex scene in a TV show.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But so I want to move on to I have a list of topics on my phone here.
Go ahead.
And we're going to talk and do a little discussion.
All right.
I'm totally going to cut out the sex scene part. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay.
No one needs to know about young Iron Fist.
No one needs to know about Danny Rand and his fight against the... Oh, my God. His fight is against the hand. Come on. Come on.
Okay, so... I have one here because and this I think you probably have a really interesting perspective on.
All right.
Because let's see, you got a Facebook in high school, right? Like late high school, give or take.
I think it was like 2012 or something.
Okay. All right. So
I was a sophomore, I think.
Okay. All right. And so, because I mean, I know like I had a Facebook since I was like in middle school or something like that, and I tried to be
look
online.
at you.
Oh yeah, very with it.
I had sex when I was 14. Like okay.
No, but so I'm genuinely curious because it's like I think probably 99% of millennials and 99% of people to the age of like probably 30ish probably have some form of Facebook / Twitter / Instagram or whatever. So I'm genuinely curious, like what was the holdup, man? Why'd you wait so long?
Well, I was just waiting for somebody special. I swear I'm not going to make this whole thing sexual innuendo. It just happens to be coming out that way.
Sure, of course.
But no, why did it take me so long to get into Facebook? I didn't really see a purpose for it up until about sophomore year of high. I mean, I wasn't a super social person when I was in middle school, right? When I was in middle school, my mother had cancer. I had asked a girl out, and she had, straight up rejected me to my face and like laughed.
Oh, that's not good at all.
Yeah. I was like, middle, like 8th grade was a particularly shitty year for me, right? And I was just like, I don't want to go online and have like random strangers mocking me or whatever, right? And most of my other friends at the time, they were sort of in a similar boat, right? We're all awkward at 14, and the guys that I was hanging out with, I mean, like
which are the same guys that I was hanging out with.
Okay,
John,
okay, but we incorporated you into our friends group because you changed schools. Remember?
That is true. You did absorb me into the friend group.
Yeah. So initially, I mean, I had a few friends who were on Facebook by that point, but by and large, the ones that I talked to most often weren't on Facebook.
Okay.
So I was on Xbox, is what it was.
Sure.
And so I thought, well, most of my social networking was going to be through Xbox and my friends there. Why did I need a Facebook?
Sure.
And so it wasn't until I got into debate in my sophomore year of high school that I actually developed a group of friends who, I couldn't just be like, oh, hey, yeah, let's go ahead and swap gamer tags or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, just get a fucking Facebook, right?
Sure. So, because at least from what I remember, you didn't do your own profile, right? You went under an alias or something like that.
I did. I did an alias, and I'm still under an alias.
Yeah, actually. Well, I know that, but I think the majority of people who are your friends know that you're you. Yeah. So, but I mean, what was the point of an alias? I mean, like, because I'm big on like I don't want people to have my information. I don't want some random guy calling me to sell me some bullshit that he stole from a data breach or whatever.
Right.
But like, I mean, it's Facebook. You want people to know who you are, right? Or
and I mean, the whole idea was basically that I get to control who sees me, right?
Okay.
Because there's a lot of cases there. I mean, like there was a guy I work with recently who he was, how do I put it? Like he was asking me, like, oh, are you on Facebook? And I was just like, oh, no, it's an old one, and I just don't use it anymore. I get on Facebook like pretty much daily.
Sure,
you know me, right?
Sure, I do.
But
I know all of your posts and all of your messages and everything like that.
Yeah, but I don't come out and I don't want to be out there just so that way random people can friend request me, and then when I don't accept because I don't want to be spammed by this person putting stuff up online. And then they come at me and they're like, why haven't you accepted my friend request yet? It's like, I just don't want that awkward conversation. Right?
Sure.
And there's been a number of times where I've had to have that kind of awkward conversation. Like,
really?
Yeah. In debate, there was a point where there was a lot of people I had just added because they were on debate.
Sure.
And they weren't bad people by any means. I did genuinely enjoy talking to them and whatnot.
Yeah.
The problem was that when they were online, they were much more spammy, I guess is how you could say it, right?
Spammy, yes.
They would say, they'd be posting like, oh, here's what I did at this party this weekend, or here's what I did at this brown party. Like a brown party is where a whole bunch of South Asian people will get together and they'll.
Yo, that's extremely racist, and I'm not even.
That's
brown.
what they literally called it. Like, I don't know what else you want me to say. Like that was but no, I mean, there was a lot of times where people would just be like, oh, I did this or I did that, and it's like, well, I didn't.
Like, are they directly messaging you, or they post like you just on your feed, or
it was on my feed?
Oh,
right?
okay, all right.
I mean, a big thing. I mean, at a certain point, Facebook sort of became like my primary news source. I mean, I used to go to Newsmap a lot. By the way, anybody listening, you should totally check out newsmap.jp. I think is the IP address, or is the web address?
Yeah.
Domain name. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
A fucking loser doesn't know what the domain name is. No, just kidding. Go ahead.
But no, so Newsmap it had like all these little boxes, and you could click on stuff, and it would have world events, and then it would have domestic events, and it have science and technology, or entertainment and sports and media and whatnot.
Sure.
And the bigger the bigger the importance, the bigger the box was, right?
Oh, okay.
So it's actually really cool because it helps you sift through what's probably like the most relevant information today or whatever, and it's pretty consistently updated. I mean, I think they updated it once or twice a day.
Oh, okay.
I don't quote me to that.
Sure.
But
For the record, John has said that it updates once or twice a day. If it doesn't update once or twice a day, we'll torch his house.
Yeah, I was about to say torch his gas tank. It's no, but
so that was like your primary news source.
That's what I started with, because when I was in debate, you basically had to stay up to date on world events, and so what better way to do that than to have this wonderful website where it literally did that for you.
Well,
but then Facebook basically came along and let me, sort of, like, okay, well, this is sort of like Newsmap, except I can also pick specific sources of information. I can say, here's one perspective. Like, I subscribe to The Economist, which is generally considered to be sort of like a neoliberal publication.
Yeah.
Not liberal in the sense of like they're left wing, but they
right.
capitalistic, I should say. And I also do have some other, and then, nice.
Sorry, okay, real quick. We had some good ass gyros from a place. I don't remember the name of the place, but it was really good.
Gyros are good.
They were so ginormous. I mean, like,
got a lot of meat in your mouth.
There was a lot of meat. I wanted their meat, and my mouth is really good. Like, honestly. This place, sorry, we're totally tangenting off something real quick, but thank you. I'm glad that I'm good. One thing that I really, really appreciate about Richardson is that there's a bunch of Middle Eastern Greek food. It's just like so beautiful. Now, I mean, how often do I go to these places? I mean, I don't know. I'll go to Taco Bell and stuff like that. But I'm glad that their culture is here. Sophisticated middle class white man wants culture in his life. But anyways, aside from
so to get off of that Tajiki tangent there, yeah. But Facebook basically allowed me to have a news source where I could have a number of different perspectives, and it was effectively Newsmap, but a little bit better, right? Because Newsmap randomly selects articles from the internet. This gave me some choice, and so for quite a while, Facebook effectively just became a news feed for me. Not that that's really a great thing, because Facebook can just be littered with random bullshit.
Well, I mean, but you can choose what pages to follow and stuff like that, right?
Right.
Well, so I mean. Did you find yourself, because now I'm curious, did you find yourself liking like Fox News or CNN just to have like to kind of have that in your back pocket of, okay, these are what the mainstream channels are talking about, or was it always like independent?
I strayed away from American media. I had BBC.
Oh, okay.
I did not have CNN or Fox or MSNBC though.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
So what made you trust BBC out of everybody?
Why BBC? I mean,
because BBC, like, I know the stigma is BBC's like, they're looking outside in, so they're going to give an quote unquote unbiased opinion. But I feel like they lean left a lot. Like,
they lean liberal, I should say that.
Sure.
Kind of. I picked BBC because to me, I just couldn't watch Fox, right?
Well, sure.
I mean, I
a small majority of us can handle Fox.
I mean, I can watch Fox purely for the reason of criticizing it. Right?
Oh, okay. Sure.
But MSNBC, I couldn't stand watching MSNBC either, in a large part because my parents have it blasting all the time, right? Like,
really?
My parents love MSNBC. I actually put out a post where I said, in my house right now, my parents have 4 different televisions blasting the same broadcast of Lawrence O'Donnell's show. I feel like I'm in North Korea where they can't turn the propaganda off. So for me, MSNBC and CNN, I generally get that just from having it on in my house, because that's what my parents normally watch. Right?
Sure.
So I didn't need to be continuously inundated with what I had just heard blasting from the television, 15 minutes ago. But what I wanted was, I didn't really, I like BBC. I have Al Jazeera America, And I take pretty much everything in terms of news feed wise kind of with a grain of salt.
Sure, which you should.
Right. But I do like to have a lot more foreign networks, or a lot more foreign news networks, I should say.
Okay.
Just because personally, for me, especially when I was in debate, I was a foreign extemporaneous speaker. Basically, what that means is extemporaneous speaking is where you have a topic, you have 30 minutes to draw 3 topics, you decide one of the 3, and then you have to research, write, and memorize a 5 to 7 minute speech within that 30-minute period, and then go deliver it. Right.
Okay. Wow.
So this is like, this is great, by the way, if you have for your jobs in the future, right?
Uh-huh.
So it's like, hey, John, where's that proposal that I asked you to draft up? And before you're done shitting down both legs, you're like, nah, problem, boss, I got this. You're like, I'm like, put me in, coach, I'm ready. That's just.
Yeah.
But so I was foreign extemporaneous speaking, right? So I particularly kind of stayed away from a lot of domestic issues, just because for me, especially when I was in this, I had got into this about 2012. So this is right smack dab in the middle of the election, right?
Sure, of course.
And at the time, domestic politics to me was incredibly boring, because when I was doing domestic extemporaneous speaking before I did foreign extemporaneous, most of the questions were always like, oh, which Republican candidate do you think could beat Obama? And I was like, none of them, right? Because if you've looked at the history of the Republican Party in the last, I don't know, maybe 10 years or so. I mean, since McCain, right? Like McCain actually had a decent amount of support from pretty much most Republicans.
Yeah.
But 2012, you had like 15 different dudes on the Republican stage, all representing various different groups from the American right.
Sure.
And it wasn't until you had a populist like Donald Trump come in that you actually had any sort of, I mean, I guess you could get one group that had enough steam sort of to carry the election. But I mean, if you remember the 2016 election, there was plenty of front runners, right? I mean, Jeb Bush, Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz, Donald Trump. Who's the Ben Carson? Yeah,
Ben Carson was not even. Don't even try and.
Okay, fine. Ben Carson was not a front runner, but he was at least up on the stage. I think.
Well, sure. Yes.
I mean, fucking Rick Perry was up there too, right? And so was Rick Santorum, wasn't he?
Rick Perry was not on there. Neither Rick Perry nor Rick Santorum, I think.
I mean, in 2012.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were 20. I was like, I don't remember them running.
No.
Yeah, I think you're right about that on 2012.
Yeah, but for me, domestic extemporaneous speaking was, it's like there's just a whole bunch of. I mean, the question for pretty much all domestic extemporaneous speaking at that point was always, what's going to come of the Republican Party, because the Democrats in the early 2010s were pretty dominant.
Okay.
And for me, I got bored of answering the same question of which of the 30 different people on this stage who really don't have, the ability to to sort of like completely like sort of like unite the party around them. It got boring, so I switched over to foreign extemporaneous speaking, because this was also the time when sort of the situation with Iran, this was what was this? I'm sorry. Jeez, does it have to go? Do I have to put the mic in my mouth? Is that
no?
What it is?
I mean, I don't know. We probably should have done a little more. It's just because it's like I'm looking at it, and whenever I'm talking, I have like a bigger.
I'm sorry.
Form. Yeah, John, you need to talk louder. Okay.
I'm sorry.
Good. It's okay.
But anyways, so this was around the time when Ahmadinejad was doing. I don't remember exactly what it was he was doing. This was during the early days of the Iran nuclear deal, if I'm not mistaken. So there was a lot of very interesting stuff going on in terms of foreign policy, right? You also had, I haven't followed up on this, but there was, during the time, there was something called a pivot to Asia, which was a big part of the United States foreign policy at the time, which was the idea that the United States should probably start focusing more on East Asia and Southeast Asia. Now, I haven't followed through to see what came of that.
Sure.
But I found it interesting to look at foreign topics, right? And I'm also very big into geopolitics and geography and history and whatnot.
Oh no, yeah. For the record, in our world history class, John literally didn't need to read. Well, sure he probably needed to read the book a little bit, but like pretty much how it was in our class was we had to read the chapter, and our teacher had a shit ton of questions going over literally anything in the chapter, and John would be like half asleep, and then our teacher would be like, all right, John, answer this question about the Mesopotamia, blah 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 blah, and John would be like, well, you see, the answer is insert correct answer, blah 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 blah, because I'm a fucking genius, blah 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 blah. And then our teacher would just be like, what the fuck is going on, dude? You're like brilliant. And then fucking remember I'm not gonna say her name, but the chick who literally always just read the book, and she like had
was
like,
this
yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
She was just fucking reading straight, like literally she copied out the book and just read out
line for line. Shit.
Fucking our teacher literally, he got so pissed one day because it was like halfway through the semester.
She's a fucking teleprompter. That's what she was.
She's a teleprompter. But he got super pissed because like literally I think me, you, and maybe a few other people were like actually, you know, being able to comprehend the question and regurgitate, not just regurgitate, can't say that word, regurgitate, but actually comprehend and, you know,
produce
an answer.
Yeah.
And he got super pissed one day, and he like threw his fucking marker across the classroom, and he's like, "God damn, you people are so stupid," or something like that. So
he actually blew up on me once too. Remember that when I
did he really?
Yeah. There was this one book that I kept on reading, and you know, there was one day when I was kind of like, you know, thumbing through it or whatever, and he had a lesson going on, and he's like, "Anybody have any questions?" And I was just sort of like thumbing through that, and I was like, "What?" You know, I was talking to myself,
sure,
right? I was like, "What is this?" And he comes over, he's like, you know, he grabs the book, smacks it closed or whatever. He's like, "Do not ask me about that book again. You bring it up, I'll throw you out of my class." I was like, "Oh shit!"
Are you serious? I do not remember this at all.
You got to ask Pierce about it, if you can ever find him. Right?
Oh, I mean, I talked to Pierce at UNT maybe a few times. He was in my dorm.
He's at UNT.
Yeah, last time I checked. Yeah,
shit, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he was. We were in the same dorm. This was like what, back in 2014, 2015, I think. We were in the same dorm, and we had just a few conversations, like just, you know, kind of the lovers missing each other, and yeah, it was. I feel like he's doing all right. I would imagine he's still at UNT because I got the fuck out of there as early as I could. But yeah, no, Pierce probably remembers that.
Yeah.
All right.
I don't know.
That's cool.
Anyways, but so yeah, basically just trying to get back on point here because I know we've gone on another Tajiki tangent here.
Dude, I love tangents.
Yeah.
So good.
No, with regards to Facebook, you know, I like getting a lot of foreign sources just because originally that's what I was sort of doing at the time.
Sure.
And I still do that, right? I follow another page now called Telesur, which is it's what's it, a state media out of Venezuela.
Really?
Yeah. So I actually do get a South American perspective as well. So I have AJ Plus or whatever Al Jazeera is in America, which is going to be, you know, sort of. I mean, I get more than just Al Jazeera for the Middle East, right? You know, it's very oversimplistic.
Sure.
And I get more than fucking Telesur for South America, but those are two particularly active news sources that I do actually reference quite a lot. As I do The Economist, which has sort of now become one of my main British sources alongside BBC, because BBC, in my opinion, has kind of dropped off a little bit.
You think so?
At least, I mean, I unsubscribed from their page, so I now only have The Economist in terms of a British source.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So now I'm like, we're gonna take a step back here and like really get into the deep dive of our spirituality and intellectuality and everything like that. But because I mean, you can probably ramble on for hours and hours, and I know in previous conversations, just, you know, playing Xbox and stuff like that, we've talked about just random BS and thoughts and theory and stuff like that over just literally whatever. But more specifically, why politics, man? Out of everything in the world, why are you so invested in this kind of stuff?
So that
not to like drill you and say, why the hell are you the way you are, because it's stupid.
Well, you're gonna pin me to a wall and drill me like that, you know. No, okay, so actually this is very interesting because there was a question I was asked during a debate tournament. This was, I think it was my junior year, because that was sort of the crux, that was sort of the pinnacle of my time in debate, right? Because senior year, I was just like, oh wait, I don't have to do this, right? and you know, a lot of the debate team, when I was originally in it and as a sophomore, you know, it was just for fun, right? I had a lot of friends in there and whatnot, but as we started, getting older, it got increasingly more political.
Oh, really?
Not political in terms of like I'm a Democrat, you're a Republican, and
Sure, but the
me
topics...
over here. Yeah, no. It was more like internal classroom politics or whatever. So
okay.
you're talking about people who are sort of like vying for.
Okay. So whatever positions within the actual debate group.
Yeah, and you had people who were like, oh, this group of debaters isn't going to talk to this other group of debaters because
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So it got like that kind of.
It wasn't so bad that it was ever like, I'm just going to completely, spite them just because I don't like them or whatever, right? But there was definitely a very clear, there were groups in there where people were like, I'm sorry, jeez.
It's totally fine. It's totally okay. You're totally fine.
Yeah, but there was definitely a lot of, debate team politics that I didn't particularly care to continue participating in.
Oh, okay.
And so...
And this was junior year, you said?
This is my senior year, though.
Okay. So you're just senior year break, whatever.
Yeah, senior year. Senior year, I went to I think maybe 3 or 4 tournaments, and they're just the big ones, right? There's one at Hockaday, which is a private school in Dallas, and that one's always that's sort of a real big one. And I was like, yeah, I'll go to this one for sure. And then there was also districts, but I only went to like I think 3, maybe 4 at most that year. But okay. so junior year was sort of like the pinnacle, right? And there was this one time where I was giving a foreign extemporaneous speech, something about a crisis in the Eurozone, right? Okay. Because this was right after the I think it was the 2014 crisis with the Eurozone, where the Greek economy started collapsing.
Oh, sure.
Well, actually, no. There was the crisis in the Eurozone predated that. It came shortly after the 2008 financial collapse or whatever it was, 2007, 2008. Anyways, I apologize if I'm butchering the dates here.
People are gonna call you out. They're gonna like text you and message you.
They're going to fuck me up.
They're
gonna
say, "Boy," with the hand, boy.
Boy, don't get it played. I nominate you for these hands. I nominate you for this fade.
Fake news.
Anyways, but so there was a guy in my round who was my judge, right? And I had given some speech about the European economy, I think is what it was. And he said, what's your name? I said, my name's John, right? He goes, John, what do you want to do in life? And I said, I really like politics and history and geopolitics and geography and stuff like that. And he, his answer was, he just kind of like put his finger on his chin. He goes, and if your parents weren't pushing you to do that? And I was just like, probably still geopolitics, right? I mean, looking back at it now, I'd still love history. I'd probably add writing, right?
Okay.
Because I really like writing.
Sure.
You can check out my literotica, 50 Shades of Brown. I kid. But, for me, I always took a very big interest in geopolitics and just, I guess you could say politics and history and economics in general. One, because I was raised in a very political household. My parents were very open about being political, and seeing as it's Texas, sure. Right? And if you couldn't tell from them watching MSNBC, they're Democrats, sure. Right? So in a lot of cases, I couldn't just kind of take for granted being on the things that I could say, right?
Right.
Anytime I wanted to make a political statement when I was younger and I was supporting a Democratic cause, I had to have facts to back it up. I had to have basis as, like some sort of argument or whatever. Because, if I was a Republican living in Texas and I said something, everyone would just sort of nod and go, that's exactly how it is. Yes, Texas should secede. We could totally do it, But if you're a Democrat in Texas, unless you're living in like Laredo or Brownsville or something where, there's a large Hispanic population, because Hispanic populations in Texas are usually more blue.
Sure.
Or maybe if you're living in like Austin or something.
Austin, Denton,
yeah. But with the exception of a few, I guess you could say, liberal enclaves or lefty enclaves or whatever, most of Texas is generally Republican or sort of right.
Right.
So, if I wanted to give a political position, it would be me as like one Democrat this is earlier, right? Because I'm not a Democrat now. But when I was a kid, I kind of was.
Sure.
But
everybody was.
Yeah, but if I wanted to give a position or something like that, if I had a political opinion, it would be me as one Democrat, maybe two or something if I was in a class, and then there'd be like at least 5 Republicans against me, right?
Sure.
So I actually had to, stand my ground, right? That type of thing. And eventually, the fact that I was originally brought up in a political household was only compounded by, I guess you could say, the political issues of the day. My mother had cancer, right? And so healthcare became a real big concern. And my mother, she actually had, when she was doing her chemotherapy, they put you in a chair and you're alongside a lot of other people who are also doing chemotherapy, right?
Sure.
And she had a group of gals. It's been a while, and so I want to say there was 9 of them.
Okay.
And she was one of 2 that survived cancer, right?
Oh wow.
Yeah, the other 7, I want to say it's okay. So don't hold me to the numbers on this because I'm not exactly sure how many there were.
Right.
I know, but I've heard their stories.
But
right?
a large
yeah.
majority.
Now this isn't to say that like 7 out of 9 people with cancer die, right?
Mm.
But this was a particular group,
Sure.
right, that she was with.
Sure.
I think out of the 7 that she was with, or the 9 she was with, she had one other person who survived alongside herself, and I'm very thankful for that. But for the other 7, she had 4 that had not seen a doctor. They had foregone seeing a doctor because they couldn't afford it until eventually it got to like a stage 3 or something, and it was too late.
Right.
And then the other 3 were probably the most infuriating because this was when you could still be denied for having a pre-existing condition.
Oh yeah.
And so they knew about it prior to it becoming effectively terminal, right? Before they got to stage 3 or 4 or whatever.
Sure.
And they simply couldn't pay for it.
Wow.
So there was that year. There was quite a few kind of heartbreaking stories. I mean, my mom and dad told me about this one particular story where they were saying, there was this one lady who said, you gave us our last Christmas together, and that really, like that really hit close to home, right? Especially because these kids were like my age, right? They had their moms, right?
Sure.
But in a lot of cases, their dads had walked out on them because they. What are they going to do? The mom's, got cancer and she's terminal or whatever. And you've got kids who are my age, maybe like a year or 2 older. In a lot of cases, they were younger than me.
Yeah.
And they are about to lose their pretty much the only parent they've got left.
Wow.
And to me, that was just like, I can't sit here.
Yeah, I can't imagine that at all.
Yeah, I can't just sit here and do nothing, right? Like this was like, it was like one of those heart wrenchers,
Right.
And especially after that as well, I got increasingly involved in, I guess you could say, more radical politics. Because to me, like I said, I was a Democrat before this, right? But I couldn't. I was like, why are we being so gentle, right? In terms of my thinking, I was like, these healthcare groups or whatever, these mega insurance corporations, they effectively just murdered 7 people in my mind, right? If you had kept somebody from seeing a doctor because they couldn't afford it, if you kept somebody from getting treatment because they couldn't afford it, or because you wanted to deny them to make a buck, right? I mean,
that's pretty fucked.
Like, why didn't you just shoot them on the spot if that's the case, right?
Yeah.
And so my opinion was, just like, why should we sit back and do like this, like go chanting outside Congress singing Kumbaya and saying, what do we want? Healthcare. When do we want it? By 2012 or whatever. That was just bullshit for me. And so in my mind, it was like, I need a political stance that wasn't just, like minor change in a few years when we can get to it. It's like, these women did not have years. These women had months, right? Maybe.
Yeah.
And in a lot of cases, that was already too late for them.
Sure.
And so it was like, I could not sit by and just stay with this sort of like moderate politics. So that's when I originally sort of began leaning towards, like social democracy or whatever, sort of like the Scandinavian system.
Sure,
right?
Sure.
And then as time went on, my politics eventually got more and more lefty, shall we say.
Wow.
Yeah.
That was intense.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, well, because, and again, I'm not trying to drill you or anything like that, but you said, because right now you're going and doing history and stuff like that. That's what you're studying for.
I'm a history major.
Sure. But I mean, why do that if you've been such a advocate for political change, and you're definitely very aware. I think something that's fleeting, especially the youth and even kind of the 30s to 40s. They think that they have the whole picture, but until you actually subscribe to all of these articles and get the full story and understand, it's only half the side.
Right.
You're not fully invested in all of this.
So actually, make a little mental note,
Okay.
because I do have I don't want to derail the whole thing, but there is a
go ahead.
small little bit about Venezuela I want to talk about in a little.
Okay. Yeah.
But so
put a
why
pin.
why go into history?
Yeah.
So I'll preface this by saying that there's a lot of people who, whenever they talk about history, they always say those who don't know their history are doomed to repeat it, and I
Sure.
don't like that answer, right?
Right.
Because in a lot of ways, I think that has more. How am I going to put this? It has more sex appeal than it does real actual fact, right?
Okay.
It's sort of like I say most people don't know this. Just as an example, and I'm sorry, I don't want to go tangent.
No,
here.
dude, you're totally fine.
But when you ask people about what was the German strategy in World War II, right?
Mm-hmm.
Most people will tell you blitzkrieg, right?
Right.
Blitzkrieg is a term that was invented by the press, right? It wasn't military doctrine. In fact, the Germans did have a B-Krieg, right? But it was Bewegungskrieg, right?
Uh-huh.
The warfare, movement warfare, right?
Right.
Not lightning warfare. I'm probably saying it's Bewegungs. I can't. I'm sorry.
It's all good. It's okay.
There's some German words where it gets caught up in my mouth and I don't say it so good.
Sure.
So yeah, there are certain times when things have basically sex appeal, right?
Right.
We say them because they're flashy or because they're just hot button words and you can get a conversation going with them or whatever.
Oh yeah, totally.
So for me, the phrase those who don't know their history are doomed to repeat it.
Mm-hmm.
It's always been one of those things where it's more used by like alarmists, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm.
Not to completely crap on people. I mean, I think Howard Zinn was talking about that, and Howard Zinn is a person, he's dead now, but I respected him quite a bit, right?
Sure.
But for me, the real importance of history is understanding the context of the world we live in now, right?
Okay.
It's like, again, it's like you don't have that full story, right? I mean, if you were to walk in on a situation where, like say there's a woman who is standing above her husband with a knife or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and you just walked in on that, you might say like, hey man, you need to put the knife, hey lady, you need to put the knife down.
Right.
But what if like 5 minutes earlier, the husband was like beating on her or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So there's context. You have to understand where things come from,
Right.
And to me, I always found history particularly interesting just because, not only just for the practical value of it, but
Mhm.
when you really think about it, it is sort of like the greatest story ever told, right? Because it's the story of us, right?
Mhm.
And especially, when you get into like the 19th and 20th centuries, which is where I particularly like to focus,
Mhm.
is where you are now focusing on, big changes, right?
Mhm.
You're talking about, gigantic leaps forward in humanity in the last 200 years only. You're talking about abolition of slavery, the rise of the labor movement, civil rights and whatnot. This big jump in progress,
Yeah.
right? And so for me, this is, the greatest story ever told, right? On the biggest scale, the whole world, right?
Right.
And you've got some of the biggest and the best players and whatnot in terms of all these historical figures and whatnot. Not to say that fiction is lacking, right?
Mhm.
I apologize.
It's all good.
But-
Burp away. I fart away. It's all good.
Yeah. But in my opinion, fantasy and fiction, for as cool as they are,
Mhm.
they don't hold a candle to how awesome humanity can be, right?
Okay.
And for me, it's just really cool to learn about that.
Mhm.
So I started learning about our history, right?
Mhm.
Because I thought it was cool. I used to be really big into Cold War history, right?
Yep.
Yeah, this was during high school.
Of course.
And then when I got into early college, it was mostly early 20th century, so pre-Cold War, but like World War One era.
Yeah.
And now I'm going back further. Now I'm into 19th century, so I'm
Really?
slowly working my way backwards in time.
Is there a reason for that, or you eat up all the Cold War, you eat up all the World Wars, and then now it's like, what's left? Let's go back.
Well, yes, and also another thing that I've been getting into a lot lately. This is something I probably picked up. I want to say about 2 years ago. Actually, probably closer to a year. Let's say a year and a half. Split the diff. I got into writing alternate history.
I remember you've enlightened me, but go ahead and enlighten everyone else.
So alternate history is where you go back in time, you pick a POD, a point of divergence. It's just one event in the history of mankind where you say, okay, well, what if this went differently, right? And so I like going back and thinking about that because one, it's cool to write a new story, right? Sure. But also because it really gets you to intimately understand the players that were, the players and the factors at play there, right? Because now it's no longer just like watching, like a robot on a stick, act through their motions or whatever. Now you have to think of that person as like a three-dimensional dynamic person, and how would this person interact in this scenario or react in this scenario or whatever. And so for me, I thought that was really cool. And so I've been working my way backwards. The first alternate history that I really worked on was Operation Spark, which is a code name for one of the plots to assassinate Hitler.
Okay.
So I thought that was cool. And then now with everything that had come up about the Confederacy, you will find in a lot of alternate history circles that there is a lot of I don't want to call it like a right-wing circle jerk, but in a lot of cases, there's the two most popular alternate histories in the English language, the two most popular points of divergence in the English language are the South wins the Civil War and the Nazis win the Second World War, right?
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
In large part because this sort of disrupts our, I guess you can say, our preconceived notion of, a history of progress, right?
Well, real quick, so with all of these PODs that you're expanding and building upon, how far into, like, I don't know, it's weird to say, how far into the present do you go, or is it okay? Let's say Operation Spark that happens, we successfully kill Hitler.
The Confederacy.
The Confederacy.
You remember that from
dude? Okay, all right. So just for the record, this was what 2015, 2016, I think, probably 2016. Like an official AP World History textbook.
We graduated in 2014. So
oh shit, you're right. Oh my god,
it had to be 2012.
Oh my gosh, this is so weird. Sorry, I'm thinking college.
Yeah.
So yeah, like 2012 because we started in 2010. So yeah, like 2012, probably 2013, somewhere around that time.
2012. 2012.
Oh my gosh, the best meme of the year. Anyways, officially published AP U.S. history textbook that probably was distributed to who knows, tens of 20s of maybe hundreds of different schools. Okay. And when they were going over the Civil War, they misspelled Confederacy and they called it the Confederacy. And I don't know like how that goes unchecked. Like it's just I don't get it. So
well, actually something that's interesting in that same vein in I think it was in Denmark. There was some professor who was supposed to, or not professor, it was a teacher.
Yeah.
Who they're like, oh well, we need a map of the Cold War, right? And they went online and they found this map that was produced by an alternate historian, right?
Really?
And so there's this map of, Europe,
yeah,
but it's not the Cold War. It's got, like Russia owning, Denmark as well, and, like half of Turkey or something.
Yeah.
and there's an independent Kurdistan or whatever, and it's also communist, and but so they fixed the problem before it, like it went into production. Right?
Oh, wow.
But they got it before it went into circulation.
Sure.
But boy, can you imagine how fucking pissed they were. They're like, who the fuck found this piece of shit map? So.
Yo, that's hilarious.
Yeah. But so you're saying how far into the present? How close to modern day do we go?
So how?
It really kind of depends on how dedicated you are, right? So like
how dedicated are you, John?
Okay, so I'll give you an example. Currently, I'm I got sick and tired of seeing the right-wing circle jerk of
Sure.
people going about saying, how awesome would the Confederacy be if it survived to this day or whatever, right? And so I said, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and write a Confederate alternate history.
Okay.
Even though at the time it wasn't what I cared about, right?
Sure.
At the time, what I was particularly interested in was Germany, right?
Of course.
I really liked my Operation Spark history.
Mm-hmm.
I was really big into what if Germany had unified in like 1848, right,
Mhm.
with the revolutions of 1848, or some other aspect of German history or Soviet history, because I still like the Cold War at this time.
Of course.
And but there was just so many Confederate alternate histories
Mm-hmm.
that I just said, screw it, I'm gonna write one, and
Mhm.
I'm gonna do my homework. I'm not gonna be like everyone else in here who just cherry picks like two events or whatever and be like,
Right.
oh yeah, the Confederacy would be fucking awesome. I was gonna go through and I was gonna make like the most hardcore, well researched thing that I could do,
Sure.
right? And
As,
try and
as an educated man.
yeah, really try to bang this shit out with some truth in it, right? And so
Well, real quick, I'm sorry. Real quick before you get into that, I'm
Mm.
like, this is a question. So where do we find this kind of stuff? Like, it's on Reddit or is it?
there's Reddit posts, there's alternate history, there's a group on Facebook.
Oh, okay. So
that
this
I'm-
just across social media, you probably can find somewhere in the
Yeah.
crevices.
yeah. In terms of like, is there one? Is there a mecca of alternate history?
yeah.
No,
Oh, okay.
not really.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
Maybe. I mean, there is alternatehistory.com,
Oh, okay.
right, which is definitely
A location to go.
right. It's definitely one of the big places where people go.
Mhm.
Originally, the first site I got involved with was called Alt History Wikia, right?
Oh, okay.
It was just a wiki.
Sure.
And then I found Alternate History Online, which is a Facebook group,
Uh-huh.
and then I found Alternate History Reddit.
Oh, okay.
And the one I'm most active on still is Facebook.
Oh, okay.
But
Sure.
I am currently, after I put up two chapters or whatever of my Confederate alternate history,
Uh-huh.
and people were saying, "Man, that's just a wall of text." Like
Yeah.
there's so much to read through or whatever.
Yeah.
So why don't you serialize it? Like have it be where you got dates. It's like, okay, here's what happened.
Oh,
and when,
okay.
and then put it on alternatehistory.com.
Sure.
And so I decided now. I think I'm going to go ahead and serialize for the third chapter, and then put the first two in there also serialized.
Oh, okay. So continue on with what you're talking about.
Yeah. So as an educated person, I decided I was going to go through and write my own alternate history for the Confederacy and try and do the best possible job I could do to be as honest as possible.
Sure.
Right. And I also had to take a few liberties. Right.
What do you mean?
So like take for example, whenever you talk about a Confederate alternate history, you always have to first off start off with, okay, well, which states actually get to secede, right?
Oh, okay.
Generally speaking, the 11 that actually seceded are kind of taken for granted, right? Okay, you get those, but the Confederate flag, which, by the way, the one that we know as the Confederate flag, in quotations,
Sure.
that's not actually the Confederate flag. That is a rectangularized form of the battle flag of the Army of Northern Virginia.
Oh, okay.
But if you count the stars on there, it has 13 stars, right? Which are supposed to be representative of the 13 states of the Confederacy. There are actually only 11.
Sure.
You had the original, what I like to call the Dix Six, right? Dixie Six, which are South Carolina, Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, and Florida. That was the first round of secession before they convened a Confederate Congress. And then Texas also joined after the Confederate Congress was convened, but before the second round of secession. The second round of secession came after Fort Sumter was attacked. And Lincoln called up upon each state to dedicate 75,000 troops to the cause of putting down the South. And in response to that, Arkansas, Tennessee, Virginia, and North Carolina all seceded.
Okay.
But there were two other states that were in contention that the Confederates really wanted,
Right.
which were Kentucky and Missouri.
Yeah.
But
those were the border
states,
Yeah.
yes. Neither of them ever seceded.
Right. And that was the whole, Abe Lincoln didn't want to free the slaves because then they would definitely secede at that point.
Right.
And because the capital of the Union was like right north of Missouri or something like that.
It was between Maryland and Virginia, and Maryland was a slave state.
Right. Okay.
Now, there was definitely pro-Union sentiment in most of these states, right? In fact, more soldiers fought for the Union in every border state than did for the Confederacy.
Right.
But you can definitely tell by how they speak about these areas how important they were. In fact, Abraham Lincoln was famous for saying, if you didn't know, he said, "I hope to have God on my side in this war, but I must have Kentucky." Right. So
that's good.
Yeah. And in Kentucky obviously has some very good advantages for Confederacy. One, its northern border is the Ohio River. So unlike Tennessee, which is flat land, it means that you can basically choke point a lot of forces, right?
Right.
Kentucky also had a decent amount of industry comparative to a lot of other southern states. I mean, it didn't hold a candle to like New York or Pennsylvania or Ohio or whatever. But, it wasn't fucking Mississippi, right?
Yeah.
Mississippi had fucking nothing, right?
Right.
Texas had cotton farms out in Dallas. That was it, right?
Yeah.
It had, sugar plantations on the Houston coast. But so, there's always the question of which states secede, right? Do you get Kentucky and Missouri in there as well? What about Arizona, right? Arizona was a territory that was created by the Confederates by having the New Mexico territory south of the 34th parallel secede. And they held it for a little bit up until I think it was March or April of 1862 when they had a battle called the Battle of Glorieta Pass, which historians have now, after the war, named the Gettysburg of the West, even though it happened prior to Gettysburg.
Right.
But it was that important to Confederate power in the West. And a lot of people also don't know the history of where Confederate sympathy went, right? Confederate sympathy was not limited to the South by any means.
Really?
Yeah. In fact, a couple interesting ones. There was in New York, there was a county called Town Line that actually declared secession. The Confederates never recognized it, but they actually did dedicate 5 troops to the Confederate cause.
Oh, wow.
The mayor, I want to say, it was either mayor or governor of New York, when Fort Sumter was attacked, he actually, even before Fort Sumter was attacked, he wanted Staten Island, Manhattan, and Long Island of New York to secede and become their own independent city-state known as Tri-Insula.
Why?
Because at the time, most of the economic activity in southern New York, or in the New York City area, was based around producing cotton bolts, right, textiles, and they needed the cotton, right.
Sure.
And so they wanted a pro-Confederate city-state. That's what he wanted, I should say. Overwhelming opinion in Brooklyn, especially, which is where the majority of the population of New York lived at the time, was pro-Union.
Okay.
There was also the largest race riot in U.S. history up to that point was held in New York. It was the 1863 draft riot. And also a guy named Horatio Seymour, who was a Democratic governor, I want to say, of New York, and he was on the Democrats' presidential candidate for the election of 1868. Okay. He was one of the most vocal opponents of abolition. Right.
Okay.
So New York, for example, had very strong Confederate or at least pro-slavery ideology.
Sure.
In Ohio, there was a man named Clement Vallandigham who was arrested for trying to liberate Confederate POWs and send them back to go fight again.
Wow.
In Southern California, in 1859, there was a referendum held by the population south of the 36th parallel, which was asked, do you want to become an independent territory, which would be known, this would have bifurcated California. And California would have become California in the north of the 36th parallel. And below the 36th parallel, it would have become the territory of Colorado, named after the Colorado River.
Wow.
And it got 75% approval by the local population, which was mostly comprised of Californios, which were mostly Hispanics who did not particularly like the United States, and it's largely its racial policy.
Sure.
But it would also include a number of pro-slavery Southerners.
Wow.
And in fact, there were even calls for Southern California to secede when the Civil War broke out. However, that failed because the guy who was in charge of the arsenal there, Albert Sidney Johnston, he didn't turn over the arsenals to the rebels, because he just didn't want to. Albert Sidney Johnston, however, did go on to fight for the Confederacy. He actually fought for his adopted state of Texas.
Oh, okay.
So it's not as though this was a small movement or anything. In fact, I know I'm droning on and on and on about this.
I love hearing your voice, John, talking about history.
Thank
Keep
you.
droning.
There was a man.
I'll just cut all of this out.
Yeah. There was a man, I want to say his name was Albert Pike, I think is his name, is how it's pronounced.
It's actually pronounced Pike.
Pike? Yeah. But he was from Boston, and he was a Confederate general.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So there are certainly people out there. There was certainly widespread Confederate sympathy. Southern Illinois had a county called Marion County that voted to secede. And even though Illinois was officially a free state, there was a town in sort of southeast Illinois called, and this is very Orwellian in the name, called Equality, right?
Whoa.
And in the town of Equality, slavery was was permitted.
Yeah, sure.
Permitted, I'm sorry. But so I had to take some liberties, is what I'm trying to get at here. In terms of
this is a long
long tangent too. But so I had to take some liberties because in a sense, an independent Confederacy would not survive if it wasn't bigger than it was, right?
Okay, so you had to convert using the holes within the Union. You had to kind of convert some states that might not have traditionally.
Yeah, or states that were sort of in contention or whatever.
Sure, you just pushed them off to the side to give the support.
Right, like I mean, if you like some of the basic things that you need if you want to have an independent Confederacy are you need to have Kentucky secede, right? Because that makes the borders a hell of a lot easier to control, right? You need European intervention.
Mm-hmm. Oh wow, okay.
Yeah. Because the Confederacy was not going to be able to, it couldn't become an independently recognized state without independent recognition.
That's true.
Or foreign recognition. And another big thing is the Confederacy would have lagged behind substantially, especially in the late 19th and early 20th century, if it did not have Pacific access. Now, if you read the works of a guy like, say, Harry Turtledove, he solves this problem by having the Confederates buy the states of Sonora and Chihuahua from Mexico.
Okay.
But I've always had problems with this. One, because it would mean incorporating a brown, Spanish-speaking Catholic population into a white, Protestant, English-speaking Confederacy, right? Right. When they already have Southern California, which would be pretty much exactly what they wanted. It was white, Anglo-Saxon, English-speaking, Protestant, whatever.
And you'd have access to the Pacific.
And Pacific access, yeah. And if you didn't know, there's a great book. I would highly recommend you read this if you're into history. There's a book by a guy, it's an author named Gerald Horne. It's called The White Pacific, where he talks about how in the Pacific Ocean, you had basically this massive expansion of basically neo-Confederates. In fact, Australia and the South Pacific slave trade picked up just as the American Civil War and the Atlantic slave trade were dying down. Really? Yeah. So a lot of people don't know this, but there was a massive slave trade going on in the South Pacific up until about 1900 or so. Wow. There was a guy named Robert Towns who was very famous for a practice known as blackbirding, where he would go to he'd have some of his goons go out to some island in the Pacific, say, hey, all you natives, you want to come on board and have a big dinner and we'll discuss a trade negotiation or something like that? Yeah. And the natives were like, yeah, why not? That sounds good. They'd get down there and they're like, hey, where's all the food and why did you lock us in here? And then they'd be transported back to cotton and sugar plantations in Queensland. Right? Wow. And another massive slave state in the Pacific was Peru, right? A lot of people don't know about this, but Peru had a very large guano industry, right?
Guano's bat shit, right?
Bat and bird shit, yeah.
Okay. Now, hold on real quick. Explain why guano's a thing.
Nitrates. You can use the nitrates that you get out of the guano for fertilizers and gunpowder are the two big things.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So it was very profitable, very profitable.
Okay.
But the main
is there still like a guano? Or has it been substituted by other resources?
guano's kind of making. I mean, it's not really kind of making a comeback. I mean, it's still used in some parts of the world, but in most parts of the world that I'm aware of now, we use something called the Haber-Bosch process, which was invented by Fritz Haber and something Bosch, which were two German scientists.
Sure.
And they invented this just, I think, prior to the start of the First World War.
Okay.
And that's another interesting thing that we can maybe talk about a little bit later. But
sure.
In the 19th century, there was no substitute for guano, right?
Okay.
And so Peru was one of the largest slave states. I mean, if you can imagine how shitty being a slave was, imagine that your job as a slave was to go mine up bird and bat shit, right?
Right.
So that was another big slave state in the area. But so I had to give the Confederates access to the Pacific Ocean. It's also because Los Angeles was a very large hub for Confederates after the war.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And big cities like New Orleans, Los Angeles, and a lot of actually also settled in New York, right? And this is something that I guess you can kind of still see the legacy of today, not to get super controversial, but I mean...
let's do it. Get controversial. Drop them truths.
I mean, like LAPD, like the Rodney King case. I mean, there's definitely a legacy of racial tension and racial issues.
Sure.
Of course, across the United States. But, like California, which we normally consider to be like this massive liberal bastion or whatever, still definitely had right-wing folks.
Right.
And they still had Confederate sympathizers who moved there after the war or prior to the war, right? And so I said, well, if I'm going to make an independent Confederacy, I'm going to give them Pacific access through Colorado, right, which is Southern California, right?
Yeah.
In order to make sure that I can actually have a story where it's not just the Confederacy crumbles apart in 5 years, right? So for me, I have actually continued writing this. I started my point of divergence is in 1862. And right now I have just gotten past the First World War.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. And do you plan on bringing it all the way to the present?
Yeah, if I can. I
Okay.
can, yes. So I've gotten to where Woodrow Wilson is president, because Woodrow Wilson actually was born in Virginia, and both of his parents were Confederates.
Okay.
And so he becomes president of the Confederacy in 1914.
Okay.
The Confederacy had an election every 6 years, so I started him in 1914.
Sure.
So I'm now at just after the First World War. It's in the 1920s. At this point, the Confederacy is now like a parliamentary system because Woodrow Wilson was a parliamentarian.
Sure.
And there's a lot of big changes. Slavery's been abolished by this point.
Okay.
Yeah. It took a lot. It wasn't abolished until like 1895 or something.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I was playing with the exact date. I tried having them abolish it in 1891 or 92 or something like that. And then the guy that I originally had planned to basically do that, he fell through because he died in the actual timeline.
Oh, okay.
And so I had to sort of rewrite it. So I basically had 1895 as kind of sort of where I was expecting it.
Wow. So you've been like super detailed, very like...
Oh yeah. I actually have... I know this sounds like way too geeked out about it.
No,
But
dude,
I have an Excel document or whatever, Excel spreadsheet. Yeah. I have an Excel spreadsheet where I actually have the presidential elections of both the Union and the Confederacy. And I have a president for every election
for each
cycle.
one, yeah.
And it's not just like, oh, okay, well, I took the unions and I copied and pasted it, right? Because a lot of things would change in this timeline, right? Take, for example, in 1868, where I was telling you about Horatio Seymour, how he was this, vocal opponent of abolition. Well, in a union that was just torn apart by slavery, that's not going to fly, right?
Right.
So Horatio Seymour, actually, if you know anything about the 1868 Democratic National Convention, he was not the first pick.
I know everything about that.
Yeah. Horatio Seymour was not the first pick. In fact, he was one of the last. There was another guy. The initial pick for the first 15 ballots was a man named George H. Pendleton, who was colloquially known as Gentleman George. But
nice guy.
He was actually the vice presidential nominee for the 1864 election, and he was not picked in 1868 because he had a plan known as the Ohio Idea, right?
Uh-huh.
Which was a lot of Midwestern states were a lot poorer than the Eastern states at this time.
Sure.
And so when the United States tried to increase, the Union tried to increase, did increase spending, they had to basically borrow some money from the people, right, in order to fund the war effort.
Sure.
And so the people took out bonds, and so a lot of people in the West afterwards, they were saying, okay, well, now we need that money back, right? And so they said, we want to cash in our bonds. And the United States government said, well, I'm sorry, we don't have the gold necessary to print the dollars in order to make them redeemable.
Sure.
And the people in the West said, we don't care, right? They said, we don't care about gold-backed dollars. We want these things called greenbacks, right? Which was a money that did not have gold backing. It was just the paper money, right?
Which is what we have today.
Right. And the idea behind that was, it's like, well, they are poor and they need money to keep their economy circulating, right? And so the Ohio idea was that you could pay back federal war bonds in greenbacks, right? Now, the Democratic Party at this point was starting to shift towards what we now know as the Bourbon Democrats, which were hardcore in favor of the gold standard. Right. So in our timeline, Horatio Seymour, who was very much in favor of the gold standard, could be the Democratic presidential nominee. Especially also because now that slavery had been abolished in the Union in our timeline, him being opposed to abolition was just it was pragmatic because I didn't want the war to continue, right?
Right.
He could write it off as I just wanted to save lives instead of continue the war for slavery or whatever to end slavery. But in a union where they've been torn apart by slavery, that's not going to fly. And so instead, the Democrats, instead of being this East Coast party, right, where they are mostly concentrated in New York, or maybe like say Pennsylvania or something, which is where a lot of the Bourbon Democrats, because the Democrats for a long time were a Southern party, which is where they got most of their support. But they did have a few strongholds like New York. But in this timeline, instead of them having catering to the interests of like New York and New Jersey Democrats, they are instead a Midwestern party. And so you have George Pendleton is the presidential nominee for 1868 instead of Horatio Seymour. And there's a number of different changes in terms of like who becomes president.
Sure.
Yeah.
Wow, that seems like a whole lot. And so, how long have you been working on all this?
I started working on this in November of last year, so it's almost a year now.
Oh shit, dude! I thought this was something you've been fucking working on since like the beginning of high school or some shit.
No.
Like this has been because it sounds like all of this complexities and keeping track of all these changes in timeline and understanding all these political figures and everything like that seems like something that take years to comprehend and be able to churn out.
Well, it's not like I haven't done any research on the American Civil War or American politics in the 19th century.
Sure.
But in terms of actually putting it down somewhere and sort of constructing a timeline and having a series of events that I kind of can, just say, okay, yeah, this is what I like. Right. In terms of taking that knowledge and putting it into a timeline, it's taken a little short of a year now.
Wow. Okay. And so long-term goal, you want to get this published and sell it for money, or is this just a passion project?
I don't know. If I can write it, because here's the thing. Right now, it's more of a timeline, right?
Okay.
Like take for example, one of the most well-known alternate history writers is Harry Turtledove, right?
Okay.
And
is that his real name or like
that's his real name?
Harry Turtledove. Nice. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
So Harry Turtledove. I'm sorry. Harry Turtledove, he has published a series known as the Southern Victory series, which is another, Confederate victory timeline. And it doesn't actually have a lot of, like intricacies in terms of the details of like, here's how these political figures acted, here's this event or whatever. Instead, it has a number of different characters that it jumps through, right?
Oh, okay.
So it's like, here's Beauregard, what's his face or whatever, and how he operates in the Confederacy. And then here's Sally East Coast or whatever, and she's living in New York, and here's how day-to-day life is for her. And you get to see political events and world events happening through the lens of everyday people in most cases. There are some political figures and whatnot that you do eventually get to see.
But it's more narrative driven versus yours is very much textbook. Hey, this is pulling out the facts.
Right.
Well, I could feel like you could probably build I say this, but not like and more not like a literal sense, but like you build this expansive universe and you build this alternate timeline,
and the characters kind of just
yeah, I
write
feel like
themselves.
yeah, exactly. I feel like there's definitely, you know, that could be the like honestly, John, if you spend the time and you invest, because I mean, I know at the beginning you said you were kind of doing this just because you wanted to see if you could do it, but you know, if you enjoy this, I definitely could see you building a, you know, kind of like a Marvel universe. You know?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's not to say that I haven't done anything in terms of character writing.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I have written. I mean, it's very bare bones, but I have written a few things. For one example, I do have the inauguration speech for President William H. Seward, who was
Ooh.
never president in our timeline.
Sure.
But sort of like the closing aspects where he's saying, they are no more American than Benedict Arnold, no more Christian than Judas Iscariot, or
Yeah.
they, if they, and there's this idea that Thomas Jefferson, by the way, talked about, where he said the United States should be an empire of liberty, right?
Uh-huh.
And so this was sort of evoked in the Gettysburg Address. And so I say in my timeline in 1868, when William H. Seward is sworn in, he says, if they wish to be an empire of slavery, then we shall be the empire of liberty.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So there's characters in there and
Sure.
whatnot. And like Teddy Roosevelt, for example. Teddy Roosevelt in our timeline, he went to Panama in 1913 and 1914 in this big expedition. This is during the construction of the Panama Canal.
Right.
He was going to go survey the area and see how things were going and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And he got really, really sick. I think he got malaria or something like that. And
In real life?
Yeah, in real life.
Okay.
And he barely survived.
Uh-huh.
And he got back, and when he came back, he said, "Man, I think that trip probably shaved 10 years off my life," right? And so in my story, he still dies on the same day, but 10 years later, right?
Oh.
Because he becomes president in 1912 and never goes to Panama, right?
Oh, okay.
So instead of dying on, I don't fucking know, it's like June or July
Sure.
of 1919,
Uh-huh.
he instead dies in 1929.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, that's really awesome.
Yeah.
Like that's I find that really interesting, just because I think as the most expansive I've ever gotten with a story is just huge plot lines, huge story ideas, and going down in the intricacies. I can really respect just like you putting your nose to the grind and just fucking, all right, let's bash this out. Like, do you have like a board or something where you have all of your points and plots and ideas, and kind of not necessarily like a storyboard, but something to just barf out all of your information and stuff?
I have a Word document.
Oh, okay. I mean, honestly, we're in the digital age, so
Yeah.
I
have a Word document and a whole lot of bookmarks on my bookmark tab.
there you go.
And obviously the Excel spreadsheet.
Sure.
And I have maps too.
Oh, really?
I do a lot of map making.
Oh, so you custom make your own maps?
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
So, I mean, is it just like pencil and paper, or like
Digital.
Oh, okay. All right. I
So
was gonna say you invest in like a calligraphy and
No,
old
it's-
scrolls and stuff like that.
No.
Dude, that'd be really cool though.
Yeah.
I would definitely for an alternate Confederacy, or an active Confederacy alternate timeline. I'd definitely like to see that kind of map. That'd be pretty cool.
And I also I guess I don't know how many people are actually going to listen to this and be like, "Oh God, this guy's some Confederate lost cause." No. Let me be very clear. I am not pro-Confederate.
Sure.
I mean, I'm writing this out of, basically like historical interest,
Of course.
and basically to say, okay, you want to keep flooding my beloved alternate history with your Confederate garbage, where it's like the Confederacy becomes a superpower by 1920 or whatever.
Sure.
I'm gonna write you a history where it's a little bit more grounded.
Yeah.
Right?
No, and I mean, honestly, John, it's like, I think with your demeanor and how you've been going about this, I don't think anyone's going to be like, "Man, you're a shaved Nazi, neo-Nazi Confederate man."
Yeah.
Like, I don't think anyone's going to say that.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I do have to make the Confederacy a little bit bigger so it can fucking survive.
Sure. But that's
Right,
not-
but I
not-
also subject it to some pretty fucking brutal torture.
Sure.
I mean, I have them get hit by like fucking plagues of beetles that'll wreck their cotton crop, earthquakes, slave revolts,
Wow.
Yeah, there's some big events in this timeline too.
Wow.
So,
Well,
yeah.
I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah.
So you said the first 2 chapters are published?
They're published, right? They're on Facebook.
Oh, okay. Are they linked to your profile? Because now I'm gonna spend the next 4 hours after you leave just pouring into this and pointing out all of your problems and loopholes and. John, on this page 2, paragraph 3, you mentioned that this specific event happened, but no, it was wrong.
Yeah. Well, actually, one of the things that, unfortunately, recently, so I wrote first 2 chapters, and I was very satisfied with the first chapter because I put a lot of time into it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I said, I got to write the second chapter, right?
Right.
I got to write this next part. So the first chapter basically goes up to about 1895 or whatever, right about the time the Confederacy abolishes slavery. Mm-hmm. Very begrudgingly, by the way. And then the next chapter was supposed to be basically from like the 1890s or, like maybe 1900 up until World War I and then slightly after. So I cover about 30 to 40 years in the first chapter and then about 20 in the second. And despite it being only about half the amount of time, there is so much that goes on in the first 2-3 decades of the 20th century that I actually had to go back and rewrite some of it. So the second chapter that is currently out on Alternate History Online right now, I actually had to go back and rewrite based on new information, right? Mm-hmm. So, like, take, for example, in my timeline, I say that France and Austria become allies in the aftermath of, some European wars, like the wars for German unification and Italian unification and whatnot. When, upon further research, I figured out that Austrian policy and goals and strategy would have favored aligning them with Germany, right?
Oh.
Even if, the Germans had just beat on them in the 1866 Austro-Prussian War, it makes more sense for them to join up with the Germans based on their goals, right?
Sure.
So I had to go back and say, okay, so the French and Austrians don't get reunited, or they don't unite in an alliance or whatever. Instead, Germany and Austria do. So, fortunately, if you want to read this, if you know anything about actual world history, European political alliances, for example, stay pretty close to what they were.
Sure.
So that part's easy to follow.
Mm-hmm.
The post-war is going to get real confusing, though, if you don't know anything about American history. So, like, the Confederacy becomes a parliamentary system, right? Because Woodrow Wilson was a parliamentarian. The United States, the Union, so in Harry Turtledove's timeline, this is a little bit of a spoiler here, but he writes the Confederacy to basically be Nazi Germany in his timeline, right?
Oh.
So he has a fake character named Jake Featherston, and Jake Featherston is, Adolf Hitler.
Sure.
Like he gives speeches that are basically, quoting Hitler, and
right.
Instead of the Jews stabbing Germany in the back, it's blacks who stab the Confederacy in the back or whatever.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And, like he has, the same sort of like, there's like racial policy or whatever.
Sure.
And he launches Operation Blackbeard, which is Blackbeard is in reference to the fact that the Nazis called their invasion of the Soviet Union Operation Barbarossa, which is Italian for Redbeard.
Redbeard,
right? And is Italian because Frederick Barbarossa was a Crusader king from the Holy Roman Empire, which included both Germany and Italy.
Gotcha.
So that's a little bit of history there for that.
Axis power history.
Yay. Yeah. But so in my timeline, instead of, the Confederacy becoming Nazi Germany, like for me, Harry Turtledove was interesting, but I hate to sound like this elitist snob here, but I don't
Go ahead, do it.
Yeah. I don't really consider that as much alternate history. I call that anagram history, right?
Sure.
Because you're basically just saying...
copying and pasting and...
Yeah, you're just saying, oh, instead of this happening here, it happened here. Ho, ho, ho. I don't mind using real-world precedent as for, like, certain events. But, you can't just copy and paste the entire history of a country and then just, slap it on somewhere else and be like, duh, it's there. So
That's not original.
Yeah, so like I have I don't know, say what was I gonna say? I have like
I don't know, what were you gonna say?
I'm trying to think. Like there are certain events that happen to countries where, I use other countries as precedent, right? Like other historical events as precedent.
Yeah.
But I don't have it be like, oh, okay, well, now that they did this one thing that this country did, now their entire history is the exact same as the country that I just modeled this one event on, right?
Sure.
So in my history, this is going to be a little bit of a spoiler, a little bit of teaser for you, I guess you could say.
Teaser.
Yeah. So
right, go for it.
Yeah. So in the aftermath of the First World War, the First Great War, the Confederacy is a parliamentary republic,
Mm-hmm.
and the United States, or the Union, they originally, they have a lot of money, right? Because they've sided with Germany,
Mm-hmm.
so they've got all these, all this war booty or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But by the 1930s, so the progressive movement and the labor movement is much stronger. So in our timeline, the 1920s, the labor movement was just cracked down on. But in this timeline, because they have so much more money,
Mm-hmm.
the progressives are much stronger. Especially because also Teddy Roosevelt is president, and he was a progressive,
Sure.
and he was sort of sympathetic to a lot of labor causes and whatnot. And so eventually these big business bosses say, hey, we've had enough of Teddy Roosevelt doing, his progressive party cause. And, you're spending all this money instead of it being for, big industrialists like,
Right.
Henry Ford or whoever and, whatnot. Instead, it's being spent on, like labor groups and, developing a welfare state or whatever.
Yeah.
And so by the 1930s, there was a guy, I forget his name. I know his initials are WWW, which is really funny. But his name is something Walters. He led the Bonus Expeditionary Force, which was this group of World War I veterans who they tried marching on Washington, D.C., and they said, hey, the economy's in the crapper, and we need our bonuses in order to feed our families and whatnot, from the Army.
Mm-hmm.
And, he was dispersed. He was broken up.
Mm-hmm.
And there was actually supposedly a plot called the Business Plot, which was put together by a number of industrialists in the 1930s to overthrow FDR and institute a fascist government in the United States.
Wow.
It was busted by a guy named Smedley Butler, right?
Uh-huh.
Who was he turned out to be a pacifist and eventually later on a socialist. But the industrialists didn't know that. They were just like, oh, he's a Marine, and yeah, we got, Hitler was a soldier, Mussolini was a soldier before they became fascist dictators. So why not, find a nice, well-decorated guy like Smedley Butler? Because Smedley Butler had 2 medals of honor, right?
Ooh.
Yeah, so very flashy, right? But I have the guy who originally led the Bonus Expeditionary Force. He becomes this fascist dictator in the United States. So the Union becomes fascist. The Confederacy is a parliamentary system, and the whole world is just radically different.
Right.
So,
damn.
I know I've been droning on and on and on.
Yo, it's honestly what I'm thinking. What we'll probably do is we'll split this up and we'll have John's history, history corner. You just come by for an hour once a week, and then you can talk about history. Because honestly, I personally I find it super fascinating. And that was part of in U.S. history, especially. I thought that was really a good class, especially because Miss Fitzgerald was just like I don't know, she was pretty dope in terms of talking about shit. So no, the U.S. history, world history, that was all good. Mr. Saunders, Saunders, that's right. Saunders. It's super intriguing. So I'll probably split this up. I'm not sure how I'm gonna cut it, but I don't know. We'll see. Because we're pushing. We just pushed an hour and a half. So
okay.
I don't know where you're at in terms of headspace, and
I got plenty of energy. The first one you put out was like what, an hour 53, wasn't it?
No, it was just an hour.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was just an hour.
Oh shit, what was that? Oh, I was watching YMS. Your movie sucks.
Oh yeah.
And they did an hour 53 special.
Wow, that's awesome. Because I don't know. I feel like the goal for me, I definitely, because I don't know how much I've talked about this podcast with you, but like the goal I want to do with this is kind of like the Joe Rogan experience. If you've ever listened to his podcast, and
I've heard him once or twice.
Yeah, he's got podcasts ranging from like 2 to 4 hours.
He's got a podcast. No, I'm kidding.
Yo, dude, honestly, like his stories and stuff like that about his crazy drug-filled adventures and like doing DMT and what other drugs and stuff like that. It's fascinating to listen to. So. But we can keep chatting. I've still got like plenty of topics and stuff like that. It's up to you. All right,
hit it, man.
Let's get off this fucking history subject.
Oh, I know.
I'm sure everybody's asleep by now.
History is gay.
Wake up, everybody! Wake up. Let's see. So we talked about that's okay. So we went from talking about Marvel and sex scenes in Marvel to politics to a alternate history.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of a title that can not clickbait, but the Confederacy is still alive.
Yeah.
Let's see. Okay.
Can we do? I'm sorry. Can we please make that at least a note? Because I do want to talk about that Venezuela thing.
Oh, dude, let's talk about it right now.
Well, no. I want to get to one of your topics because I did three of my topics in a row.
Dude,
come on,
dude. I don't give a shit.
Well, okay, the politics
was
yours,
was mine. Well, it wasn't politics.
Okay,
it was social
now,
life. So
whatever. It's your turn.
What? Oh, it's it's my turn.
Throw a topic at me, fucker. Come on. Come on, pull one out of a hat here.
Dude, hold on. I'm just looking. Oh, these are really stupid topics now that I'm looking at it.
It's still a topic. Come on, man. Hit me out with something.
Let's
talk about sex, baby. Let's talk about you and me. Let's talk about all the good things and the bad things that can be. Let's talk about sex a little bit. Let's talk about sex.
All right. So, okay, here's a topic that I think is kind of interesting. So, what in terms of, because I know we've kind of had a rocky back. Nope, not that.
Okay,
not that at all. We've had kind of a rocky back and forth and sort of miscommunication and misunderstanding between each other in terms of the push for moving out. So, the time where a kid is in college or graduates college or anything like that, you have I feel like you have half the population of kids moving out and doing, I got my own apartment, blah, 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 whether or not they're funding it themselves or whatever it is. And then you have the other half that's like, oh yeah, I'm still hanging out with the parents and stuff like that. So for me personally, I wanted to get out. I wanted to leave, after life experiences and stuff like that, I was like, all right, I'm good. Thanks, Dad, for keeping me in your house for 21 years. Now I'm ready to go. I'm skedoodling. And so now I've skedoodled. I've been, I guess it's almost been about almost a month I've been out. So I was just curious, in terms of, because I know, you work, 40 hours, right? Give or take?
Right now I'm working about 25 actually at work.
Oh, okay.
Because I have to divvy up my schedule between work and class.
Gotcha.
So I'm doing about 25 hours at work, and then I have another 15 hours worth of class. So in terms of if you include school, then I'm doing about 40 hours worth of activity. Right?
Okay. So, has it been a burning sensation for you wanting to move out, or are you just kind of comfortable being with your parents, or because I know you take care of your mom. I know you've we've had conversations where you're definitely invested in making sure that she's okay,
right?
Helping out your dad with whatever housework and stuff like that.
So a little bit of backstory, I guess, for anybody who wants to listen in. My mother, as a result of her cancer, she has lymphedema, which to kind of briefly explain that, what happens is the lymphatic system was in her arms was actually compromised.
Okay.
So her arms got compromised. I think it was her. What was it? Her left arm was the original one that got compromised, and then her right arm became compromised as a result of some unforeseen complication. And then later on, her legs got compromised as well. Okay. So now she only has lymphatic nodes in her torso.
Okay.
And so every night we have to basically immobilize her. We have to put her in this big old jacket, and it has a whole bunch of air pumps and whatnot. What it does is it pushes the lymphatic fluid out of her limbs into her torso, into her core, and that helps filter out the lymphatic fluid.
Okay.
So that's what she does. But my dad, or well, I should say my sister, didn't really help get my mom into that machine all too much, especially when she first got into it. And my dad, when we first started doing this, was about equal in terms of helping me get her in.
Okay.
Actually, when it first started, he was pretty much getting her in every night when she only had one arm.
Sure.
But by the time that she got to about two arms, and especially after she got to the legs, my mom was that was by the point that, it became routine and I guess mundane enough, I guess you could say, that, it wasn't just like, oh, okay, well, this is something new and I have to dedicate time for it. It was just something that's like, oh, well, it's got to get done. Sure. And so my mom was staying up later and later. And so my dad, he has to go into work a lot earlier than I do.
Sure.
So he would he would put, he'd go to bed, right? Because he has to go to bed at some point. So I'd have to put my mother in the machine. So I was the one. So I had to be the one who basically played nurse, and I became the main person to get her in.
Okay.
Now I don't mind it by any means. I love my mother,
of course.
Gay.
You love your mom.
Oh, what a fag! Yeah, no, but so I do have to help out my mother quite a bit.
Sure.
And my dad, God love him or whatever, he does a great job now that I've taught him. Right. We have this sort of running joke where my mother, she has to elevate her legs in order to get the lymphatic fluid out properly. So. We have to put pillows underneath her legs, but she likes them positioned a very specific way. And I got good at it because I used to do it a lot, right?
Sure.
And my dad doesn't know how to do it exactly. So, there's this running joke that, I could get a sign language gorilla to do it better, It's like, Jesus Christ, Joe, do you even know how to put a fucking pillow in, And, whenever I come in, it's like, I feel like Jane Goodall watching the chimpanzees trying to get this shit done, That's just a joke, right? But anyway, so, for me, doing that is not a big deal, right? Like, it's just so mundane. It's something I have to do now. It's not a problem for me. But in terms of, living with my parents, when I was like 18, I wanted to get out.
Sure.
When I was 16, and I was in debate.
Yeah.
I was just like, yeah, man, I've got all these friends in debate. These guys are so cool, Yeah. These guys are the rad. They're so fucking cool, And I couldn't swear at that time because I had some sort of mental block. So I was always going I make the noise, right? It wasn't fuck, it was right.
Sure.
So they're so fucking cool,
Yeah.
And so I was just like, I want to move out now, and it's I had all that teen angst. It's like, fuck you, mom and dad, I hate you. And then when I got into college, I was just like, oh, wait, my parents aren't that bad after all. They're actually pretty nice people.
Yeah.
I really like them.
That's definitely something not everyone has learned yet.
Yeah.
Everyone's still in college. Fuck you, mom. Fuck you, dad.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing for me is, one, it's a lot cheaper to live with my parents right now.
Oh, amen
Way
to that, brother.
Cheaper.
Amen.
I mean, I don't like the fact that I have a 50-minute commute.
Mm-hmm.
But, I'm saving roughly $10,000 a year.
I mean, honestly, John, I don't know how you're making it 50 minutes because I'm only like 5 minutes away from your house. And, going down 380 at 20 million miles an hour, I'm getting there in like probably 30, 40 minutes. So I don't know where you're getting that extra 10 minutes.
Well, maybe it might be traffic. I don't know.
That's true. Yeah, probably. Because what time do you go to campus?
I have to leave by about 9 or so.
In the morning?
Yeah.
Oh, dude. Yeah, never mind. Yeah.
So
dude,
I have to basically get the tail end of 8 o'clock traffic, 8 o'clock rush hour, or whatever. Yeah. And so I run into that, and it's sort of, it's clearing up at that time.
Sure.
But I'm still hitting traffic. So.
Well, damn, never mind. Yeah, I think I usually went like around lunchtime in the afternoon when there's like nothing. And it's clear 380 driving down there, so never mind.
Yeah.
I take that back. I redact what I just said.
Yeah.
But anyway, so go ahead. So you're saving $10,000.
Yeah, I'm saving a boatload of money comparatively. Also because if I'm a history major, this is not something where I can get like a business, a BA or whatever, and then just okay, well I'm gonna go put it towards whatever generic job I want, right?
Right.
History is very specific, right? And so I'm gonna have to be in school for quite a while. So for me, especially, now that I have a job, I'm actually saving money, right? So I have quite a bit of money saved up, or well, not quite a bit. I have a little bit,
sure.
Right? But that's great. That's basically going to have to get me through my master's. Right?
Oh wow, okay.
So
have you taken, if you don't mind me asking, have you taken loans and stuff like that out? Or?
Not yet. I'm trying to stay away from loans for as long as possible. Yeah.
I've got a bunch of loans.
Yeah.
I'm gonna die with my loans.
Yeah, I know, right? I mean, I'm trying to stay away from loans for as long as possible,
sure.
Right? And the main reason behind that is just because. Oh, I didn't mean.
Gosh, John, you're freaking up all of the.
I'm sorry.
You know how many times John has said I'm sorry? Probably like 12 times now.
Yeah.
John, can't believe you.
Well, I'm sorry about that too. Are you done?
Yeah.
Okay. But you know, I've been saving
Bastard. Go
I've been
ahead.
saving up some money.
Bastard. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
You're gonna say bastard again? I know it, you bastard! You fucking bastard!
No, go ahead.
Anyway, so I've been
Bastard.
saving up money,
All right.
and so I'm hoping that that'll get me through my masters.
Okay.
And then perhaps because I'm
Are you gonna do PhD?
yep, and so.
Hey, my man.
Yeah, so I'm hoping to get a job for that,
Mhm.
like a post grad or whatever. So,
Oh, okay.
in terms of where to get doctoral work, I have not. I mean, I've thought about some places, right,
Uh-huh.
but I don't have anything set in stone at the moment.
All right.
But definitely, the idea of saving money to, to so that way I can kind of push.
Sure.
Stretch my funds. I
So
should say.
you're looking long term to just how can I best bang?
How
for
can I
buck?
stretch my money?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm kind of doing the opposite. I just said, you know what? I don't care that I'm paying this much.
Yeah,
a
but you
month.
also graduated already.
That is true. I did graduate, and well, I don't know. My job's all right, and I'm doing cool stuff.
I know a bloke, 30 years old, still lives with his parents. I'm 30. Oh, cherish him. Really. Both mine are dead. Actually, my dad's not dead. He's just old, senile. He's living in a home right now. He thinks it's a Japanese sniper across the way. Oh yeah, where's that? Yeah, a Japanese sniper on the third floor across the way. Oh yeah, that's a good spot. You never see it coming. You'd be like, oh, what a lovely day. There's nobody up there. Well, he is a vegetable now. That's what we've all got to look forward to. Happy birthday, mate. You ever seen the British version of The Office?
I've seen like the first 2 episodes.
Okay, well that's that
Ricky
little
Gervais.
that little scene I had about the dude being 30 and the dad being a vegetable. That's from The Office. That's from the British version of The Office.
Oh yeah. Well, aren't you just cultured?
Yeah, I know,
We
right?
could talk about The Office forever.
Uh huh.
Let's talk about The Office. No, I'm just
Free
kidding.
love on the free love freeway. The love is free and the freeway's long. I got some hot love on the hot love highway. We're going home because my baby's gone. She's dead. She's not dead. Da 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 da. You should definitely check out the Free Love on the Free Love Freeway if you haven't. It's by Ricky Gervais and it's on YouTube, and it's hysterical. Anyways,
I love how in this podcast you're the one singing a lot, but like in the last podcast, I actually listened through it just to see how it was, and I sang
because you're a narcissist and you like hearing your own voice.
I mean, I don't. Okay, I don't know if this is really horrible to say, but I listened through it whenever I was at work, and it was just it was interesting just listening to Blake and Zach and my occasional input.
Hey man,
it was fun.
I watch my own videos on YouTube just because. You ever seen It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia?
Yeah, of course.
And he's like, so wait, if these guys aren't what's his face, then who are they? And Dennis, he's just like, just a couple people who just got off. Oh yeah. He goes, what? You just get? Yeah, man. When they busted me, and then when he flipped me the finger, oh, man, that was good right there. But yeah, I'm a narcissist too. I like watching videos where I'm acting in them or where I'm talking in them. So I'm definitely gonna hit this podcast up and be like, hey,
check me out. You're gonna be listening to yourself.
Check out this boy.
You're gonna be listening to your rant and be like, wait a second, I didn't mean to say that in my alternate history timeline.
Yeah.
Damn it. I'm gonna have to have another.
Who edited this epithet in there?
I'm gonna have to have a word with the production manager.
Goddamn Jews running the media.
Yo, that's really offensive.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. I'm gonna have to redact that.
Uh-huh.
No, I'm gonna.
Well, you know what? You know what? I don't give a shit. And frankly,
Uh-huh.
I think you can go fuck yourself.
That's funny.
Yeah.
This whole part. I'm just gonna cut it, and I'm just gonna find a loop somehow, and it's just gonna be.
Oh.
I'm an idiot.
You're gonna cut it? You're gonna cut this? I'm gonna go cut myself. That's
whoa. Hey, trigger warning. All right.
TW, guys. TW. Trigger warning. Okay. I've been enough of a douchebag at this point.
You haven't been a douchebag.
Yeah, I have. All right.
You want to know who's a douchebag?
Huh. You.
No.
Me.
No. I was gonna insert a name, but we're gonna keep his identity secret.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
He is out there shooting Palestinians. That's what he's doing.
yeah, and he's
He said, Mashugana. Why are all these Arabs in my fucking settlement? Mashugana.
Yo, did you see? There's a video, and oh, there are people outside, and we're trying to eavesdrop. Or I'm trying to eavesdrop on the conversation.
This is gonna be like that scene from Jurassic Park where we got the raptors in the kitchen or whatever. Except instead of it being like these giant 6-foot-tall death birds, it's gonna be like human beings. And they aren't trying to kill us. They're just trying to bang in the other room.
Yo, I'm glad that my roommates have been pretty quiet, and I haven't had to knock on anyone's doors.
Awesome.
Excuse me, could you keep it down, please?
Excuse me, could you keep the fucking to a lower decibel, please?
I'm trying to masturbate. Can you stop fucking so loud?
No, can you fuck louder? I want to hear this. It's... Oh, God, this is disgusting. I can't believe you talked me into this. This is... Okay, what were we talking about? We're talking about living with your parents. Okay, so I guess while we're on...
with your parents... Could you please keep it down? I'm trying to jerk off here.
So I had a friend of mine recently. So my parents are on their 25th anniversary in Europe right now.
Aww.
And so I had a friend come over last night because I have a night class and I have to feed my dogs. And so my friend comes over and she's like, hey, how do you feel about the fact that your parents are now fucking in a foreign country? And I was like, I didn't really think about it. I mean, I guess it kind of occurred to me that they probably were, but I wasn't actively thinking about it, And so she's like, oh, okay. I was like, okay, whatever.
I think she just brought that up to make you uncomfortable and awkward.
Yeah.
Anyways. Tell me about Venezuela.
We weren't done talking about living with your parents, though.
I mean, I said what I have to say about living.
Okay, well, I'm just saying, at least for me, I don't mind living with. I mean, it's becoming a more popular trend now, right?
I think the popular trend is after graduating, moving back in with your parents.
Yeah,
I think that's the trend.
Yeah.
Not you haven't been able to fly out of your birdcage yet.
Okay, well,
spread your wings.
I don't remember how old it is. I think it was 2013 that I was...
Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I remember, I think it was 2013 I was watching an episode of... Can you stop that, please? Can you please? I'm going to kick you in the nuts if you don't stop that.
Okay.
I think I remember watching an episode of Bill Maher, Real Time. It was like 2013, 2011 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And they were having a discussion about college. And how they said, I think S.E. Cupp, who is a right-wing author, was saying that after graduation, I think it was like 85% of graduate students or students after graduation are moving back in with their parents.
Mm-hmm.
So it's definitely a trend. I mean,
yeah, but like specifically, did it break down like what their degree was or like what industry they were going into?
I think it was just across all college graduates.
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah. Wow. And there's a good reason for that too. I mean, nowadays, the cost of college, I think since the 1980s has gone up 1,700% or something like that. It's pretty insane.
Yeah, it's a crazy amount because I believe keeping inflation out of it and just comparing it real dollars to real dollars. Well, I guess that would be incorporating inflation, but whatever. Aside from that. Just keeping prices to price in terms of standard of living and costs.
Cost of living, yeah.
Cost of living and prices and wages, and average wages and stuff like that. People in the 70s and probably the 80s were able to do a full-time job, 40 hours a week or something like that, and pay for college, pay for their own, and just that was it.
Yeah.
Whereas now it's like you work full
time. Nowadays, college is a mortgage without a house and it's a job without a paycheck.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so you have to work either 2 jobs or work 40 hours on a really spectacular job to even come close to, being afloat.
Yeah.
So.
And something else interesting. I particularly don't like Bill Maher anymore, but he did have an interesting.
What happened to Bill Maher? You fucking preached Bill Maher in high school.
Yeah,
Louis C.K., Bill Maher, all these people.
Actually, you know what? Let me finish this point, and then we'll get onto that.
All right.
Okay. So,
ready.
He was talking about how he said college tuition is now like a form of birth control or whatever, right? because you got parents who are saying, okay, well down the line it's going to cost like $300,000 to send this kid to school with all this fancy shit that they've got now. And, it's sort of like preventing people from having kids or whatever, right? Now, unemployment rates, for sure, are much better for college graduates than they are for people with, just a high school education or whatever. But, he's talking about basically how high school is a form of birth control. There's something else I kind of want to bring up here. And this is something just to get people to think about. I mean, if you listen this far into the podcast.
Yeah, if you've listened, we're at almost about 2 hours.
Yeah.
So I think I'm definitely gonna because real quick. Sorry, I keep like bringing up my intentions and plans with the podcast, but I don't know. I like hearing myself talk, and if I can have it on recording what I'm doing, then I'll more likely stick to that. But what I want to end up doing is start a Patreon and kind of build the audience and stuff like that from there. And then I'll have just the regular Monday, Wednesday, Friday show, or whatever, the podcast, and then segments.
Well, it's still a show, I guess.
Sure. But segments that I want to cut or I don't think are well enough or produced well enough to make the official weekly time frame, I'll have that as like bonus content that you can, if you're $1 Patreon or whatever a month, you get the access to this or whatever it is. So I mean we can talk later more about
Jewing it up already.
If I could make a living off of this podcast, because there are people.
Well, if you could fucking do it,
yeah,
it's like that's great.
What was I gonna say? There's a guy. Are you familiar with on YouTube the Nerd Writer? He does like
no.
video essays talking about like someone's gonna take a shower now. But no, he does like video essays, like really, really smart video essays about, one was like kind of the art of Jack Nicholson and kind of how he uses anger to portray his characters and, really have a more deep connection with.
I've seen every shot of painting or whatever or something, or every scene of painting or something like that. But I'm sorry.
No, you're good. I have no idea what you're talking about though. What is every scene of painting?
I think that's the YouTube user's name.
Okay.
It's another film.
Sure, like critique, like
yeah.
So anyway, I mean, he makes like $5,000, or no, I'm sorry, he makes like $3,000 to $4,000 a month just from Patreon.
Wow.
So, and then that's not on top of the ad that he gets from YouTube and whatever sponsors and stuff that he has.
Well, that's what? That's just from Patreon alone. That's roughly 30 something to $48,000.
He's making a lot of money. Or actually, no, I lied. It's not a month. I lied. It is. Every episode that he makes, he gets $3,000. So that's like, and he does like 3 to 4 episodes or 3 to 4 video essays a month. So
that's actually quite a bit of money.
That is quite a bit of money, plus on top of the sponsorship. So if I could do that, that'd be brilliant. But I mean, that's long term from now. But anyways, totally off tangent.
Yeah. So what I was trying to say, I guess
no one knows what you're trying to say.
Yeah. So, anyways, what I was trying to say was, so Bill Maher was saying that really, yeah. Okay, so Bill Maher was saying that college is a form of birth control now.
Sure.
In a sense,
you already said that.
Yeah, I know.
Get to the point. Get to the point.
So I wanted to kind of bring this up just so that way people could think about it. But the time when college started becoming so much more expensive, when it started to really ramp up in price.
Yeah.
Was sort of in the 1980s, right? And it happened to coincide with a lot of other neoliberal reforms that happened basically during the Reagan administration. Now, Reagan also had a very influential economist who was a monetarist. His name was Milton Friedman.
Yes, I am familiar with him.
But Milton Friedman, one of his...
He was a classical, right?
Yeah. Okay. He called himself a monetarist, which was his own policy, but he studied mostly classical economics, and he was part of the Chicago school, right?
Sure.
And he also had his Chicago Boys, which produced El Ladrillo, which is Spanish for the brick. It was the economic plan of Pinochet's Chile. But just to crap on Milton Friedman a little bit more, because I fucking hate Milton Friedman. I'm sorry, but anyways, Milton Friedman. one of the things that he talked about as being one of his biggest and one of his proudest achievements from his influence in politics during the 1980s was taking the United States from a conscript army, right, where you could be drafted, right, like was what we had in Vietnam, into a volunteer army, right, which is like what we have today.
Sure.
So, but what I noticed is that college costs, if you can offer a GI Bill
Mhm.
and then, raise the costs of college to extremely high levels, that's kind of like privatizing the draft. You're basically forcing people who, if they want to get a job in a modern economy, they have to do it somehow. And if you're too poor, well, okay, you can always join the army, right?
Mhm.
So you privatize the draft. And, especially now, since the Bush years with stop loss, right?
Mhm.
Now you don't lose as many soldiers, right? I mean, I don't know what the status of stop loss is now. I don't know if it was overturned or whatever, but for sure, we still at least have the privatized draft in the form
Right.
of, the GI Bill plus the increasing cost of college.
Mhm.
So yeah, there's that. So that was my point. But I guess, well, now I've got another point that I wanted to bring up. I guess that
What's your other point?
I was going to talk about the increases in costs and debt and whatnot. Because I guess now we're already talking about debt.
Well, I mean, what like across the board debt, or more focused on our education?
I actually want to talk about United States national debt.
Okay.
Because there's something interesting about that most people don't know, right?
I probably know it.
Yeah. Well, this is something that, I mean, I know I sound like I'm doing this clickbait shit where it's like, what you don't know, what the politicians won't tell you. Listen to me. My name is Alex Jones. It's, it's like, so I don't like them putting chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay. It's... Okay, but here's something that most people legitimately don't know about the United States national debt.
Because they're stupid.
Because they're stupid. No, it's because we never hear about this, right?
Sure.
And again, I know this sounds clickbait, but let me get to the fucking point instead of just teasing the audience.
No, let's titillate him for another 2 minutes.
Yeah. Most United States national debt, most United States federal government debt, I should say, is to the federal government. Yeah. Most people don't know this because they think like, oh, our national debt's insane. We're borrowing from China, which is what our current president is running on. China. We're going to build a Great Wall. It's going to be the best wall. It's going to be better than the Chinese Great Wall, But no. So most people think that, like we have this massive debt to China or whatever, and that, the United States has like 46%. I think there was a number where it's like, people think that like 40% of the federal budget goes to foreign aid, when in reality, like less than 1% is part of foreign aid or something. Yeah. But so what's interesting about this is that a lot of people will say, oh, we're so in debt. We're like 19 trillion or whatever in debt or something like that now. And the reality is that most of that debt is to the federal government, right? And it's not the populace being in debt to the federal government. It's the federal government being in debt to the federal government. You say, how can you be in debt to yourself, right? Well, I'll do this as a demonstration. Imagine that you have two wallets, right? Like you have your day-to-day wallet, and then you have a wallet that you take when you travel, right? Like, you've got some cheap piece of shit it's not nice or anything. It's just a little Velcro wallet or whatever. You take it with you because you don't want to lose your nice wallet. And when you get on a plane, you got to put your cash and cards and whatever somewhere, right? Sure. And let's say on a normal day, you have, let's say $100 in the form of five $20 bills in your regular wallet. But then you want to go on a trip, so you take $40 out and you put it in your travel wallet, right? Well, now your regular wallet has given money to your travel wallet, and your travel wallet is now technically $40 in debt to your regular wallet, right? And that's a lot of what basically goes on in the actual United States federal government, right? What it is during the, funding for each department has to be given out by Congress, right? Sure. So different departments say, okay, well, we need X amount of funding. They put together a budget, but they don't know what they're going to be getting until Congress doles out the money, right? Sure. And so in a lot of cases, what they'll have to do is they'll go to the bond market. They will buy a lot of bonds, and then they will say, okay, well, now they'll sell a lot of bonds, and they'll have someone else buy it, right?
Right. To us.
Right. And so they'll have one department, like say the Department of Education or whatever, will, de facto transfer the money via the way of the U.S. bond market into, say, I don't know, the Department of, what did I say? Was it Transportation or Education that I said?
Education. Okay,
so they'll go to the Department of Transportation, and they'll just like say they swap the money or whatever, right?
Right.
And here's the real thing that I wanted to get to about this is that the biggest biggest one that most people go to draw from, sort of the one that everyone can draw from, is Social Security, Medicaid, and Medicare, right?
Right.
Because unlike everything else, their budgets are not discretionary spending; they are mandatory spending, right?
Yeah.
So they can go to Social Security or whatever and say, "Oh yeah, these guys, they already have their money set aside. We know how much they're going to get, so we're going to go get money from them and use it to cover what we think is already going to be lost because Congress hasn't allocated enough funds, right?"
Sure.
And so Social Security has all the funding it needs, right? And well, actually, not entirely. I mean, it gets its money from a separate tax, so it already has the money that it needs. But in terms of how it would solve, in terms of solving our debt, we would probably actually, there's a couple ways you could do that. But as it stands, it's not horribly in debt. It's actually it's stable, right? The problem is debt in other areas, right? So other departments now have to get their money from Social Security, and Social Security looks like, oh, it's critically, it'll never be able to meet, what it has to in terms of, all the people that it's supposed to be providing for, because all the other departments of the United States federal government are emptying it out because Congress has not doled out their money, right?
Right.
And so Social Security constantly looks like, oh, there's too many old people and we need to privatize it or whatever, which is just a scare tactic. Social Security, is basically solvent, right?
Right.
It has its own tax. It's not horribly in debt, but people don't know that, right?
Right.
And so that's a big issue, at least for me it is, because I'm kind of lefty, right? So for me, I'm very much in favor of trying to educate people to say, hey, look, Social Security is not failing, right? Social Security it's working. What it is all these other departments are emptying it out. And you say, okay, well, why didn't Congress just, designate the amount of money that it needs to whatever department? Well, it would take a bill, right? Federal funding has to be allocated via bill.
Right.
There has to be a law for it. And there's a lot of people who already have interest in having certain money go to certain places, right? But also, there's always going to be adjustments in terms of how much, certain expenses are going to cost for certain departments. So you can't always perfectly just nail down however much it's going to take. Also, if you tried to undo this overnight, you would collapse the U.S. bond market. So
yeah, of course,
you'd kind of fuck yourself in the process. But anyway, so that's what I wanted to talk about with the federal government and the debt there. We were talking about college.
I love how we totally tangent off of every tangent to a new tangent to a new tangent. But
new
that's totally okay.
New topic.
All right, so tell me why you don't like. I don't give a shit what we were talking about before, but tell me why you don't like Bill Maher and Louis C.K. now.
I still like Louis C.K. I like.
Uh-huh.
I think he's kind of funny.
He's kind of funny.
He's pretty funny.
In high school, you thought he was God.
Nah.
No.
He was a Hungarian Jew. How could I like a Jew?
But what about Bill Maher?
Okay, so Bill Maher, I used to really like Bill Maher on the basis that he seemed like this, I don't know, unapologetic. He sounded to me, he was like this whole "why are we being so soft" type guy, right?
Right.
He was always this, just like, if I want to say you're a fucking idiot, I'll call you a fucking idiot. And I really valued that kind of, like honesty and, well, not even honesty.
Just being blunt.
Yeah, just being blunt. Just that vulgarity, right? The fact that he wasn't afraid to, try and be, politically correct.
Right.
And I hate to say that because, PC, a lot of people when they say, oh God, PC has gotten too out of control these days, what they're really saying is, I can't say the N-word anymore. I can't call women sluts and bitches or whatever, and I can't call black people Negroes. And it's like, okay, look, we can do better than using epithets to describe people, right?
Sure.
And so in that regard, I enjoy PC and how we have, kind of reined in our language so that way we don't use racial epithets to refer to entire portions of the population. I think that's a good step. But at the same time, the idea that, we have to treat everything as, factually sound and try and be as unbiased as possible and whatnot. And, it's like, you got to call a spade, right?
Sure.
And for me, Bill Maher was doing that, right? He used to be very vulgar, and yeah, he said fuck a lot, but that didn't matter to me, right? if someone was a fucking idiot, he called him a fucking idiot. Sure. And I enjoyed that.
And then what happened?
So then what happened? Well, he got. I can't exactly.
Not entertaining.
Not that he wasn't entertaining, but he just got this very cringe-worthy form of, it's not even like liberalism anymore. He's just like a Democratic hardliner, right?
Okay.
Like the Democrats from where I stand are not a center-left party, right? They're like center, right?
Right.
Not center-right. They are center.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. But I mean, and Bill Maher even talked about this, right? He said, okay, so we have one party that's for like pharmaceuticals and bankers and all this kind of stuff. That's the Democrats. And then you've got a party for flat earthers and global warming deniers or whatever, or not flat earthers, young earth creationists, which is the Republicans, right? And so I thought, hey, great. He's criticizing the Democratic Party too, trying to get them to shape up or whatever. But it turns out, like all the time, he blatantly ignores a lot of things that the Democrats do. Like there was a segment recently he had that called the Magic R, right? Where he's saying, why is it that Republicans, if you've got a capital R next to your name or whatever, like if you were a Republican, why is it that you can get away with stuff all the time, right? Like Reagan had the Iran-Contra scandal, and instead of being, impeached for selling weapons to Iran in blatant violation of U.S. law, he's now like a saint to the Republican Party, right? Why do Republicans get away with it when the Democrats are so critically scrutinized or whatever, right?
Sure.
And there's also another thing where he's talking about how like Richard Nixon in 1968, he was trying to undermine the peace talks in Vietnam to have the war in Vietnam be an election issue still. And he's like, was that a step too far for the America First crowd? Fuck no, and
yeah.
When I was watching that, now that I have the benefit of knowledge of history, now I look back and then it's like, okay, well, yeah, maybe Richard Nixon was trying to undermine the peace talks in Vietnam, but in 1963, John F. Kennedy was trying to deliberately stall the civil rights movement so that way he could win the black vote on the promise of civil rights coming, and he could not piss off white Southern Democrats so that way he could win the next election, right?
Right.
And it's like, you think that the vote your values crowd would find that a step too far? Fuck no,
Right.
Like, there's, Hillary Clinton, right, in this last election. I don't want to just like shit on, politics in the modern age, because I know, there's a lot more to cover than just that. But Hillary Clinton was stressing that, if she was elected president, that she wanted to institute a no-fly zone in Syria, control the airspace over Syria. That was her, instead of, it wasn't like, oh yeah, let's put troops on the ground or whatever. It was, let's institute a no-fly zone, right? Which, if you were uninformed, you'd think, oh, well, that's no boots on the ground. That's not getting involved in another war, but it's showing a sign of strength or whatever, right?
Right.
Except that Ashton Carter, and I think his name was James Dunfeld. I know it was the Secretary of Defense and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. In other words, the highest-ranking military officer in the United States, the chairman, right, and the state secretary for defense, right, both testified before a Senate committee, saying that if you were to control the airspace in Syria in no uncertain terms, it would necessitate going to war with Russia, right? And to me, that's just like, whoa, big old red flag right there, And it's like, okay, well, you can't. I mean, Bill Maher was out there thumping for Hillary or whatever. It's like, you can't go out thumping for Hillary as like this progressive candidate who would have been much better when her platform would have brought us into war with Russia, right? Or it's like, I mean, I don't mean to just like sit here and shit on her for the entire time, and it's not because I like her or whatever. It's because, I think I don't get the point of sitting here and shitting on another political candidate, right? I mean, I don't like most politicians, but for me to just
I don't think anybody does.
Yeah. But I mean, the fact that he was out there thumping for Hillary, and he's another thing is he's cracking down on lefties, right?
Right.
Like he blamed the loss of the 2016 election on, oh, these Bernie or busters couldn't bring themselves to vote for Hillary Clinton. It's like, Hillary won the popular vote, dude. It's like, it wasn't that people didn't get out to vote for her. It was the Electoral College that fucked her, right? In fact, if anything, the Electoral College, which modeled the Democratic Party with their inclusion of superdelegates, that was designed, in a way, in order to prevent, candidates like Bernie Sanders from getting into power, who would disrupt that, that class dominance that you have in the United States. So, the Electoral College screwed over the Democrats. It's like, congratulations, you played yourself.
Yeah.
But
so what? So you just lost respect for Bill Maher for not holistically seeing this big picture?
He just doesn't have morals.
Oh, okay.
He doesn't have
kind of a loose cannon sort of.
He doesn't have principles that he sticks to, right?
Right.
It's sort of like, if a Republican does it, and he'll criticize it, rightfully so.
Sure.
But if a Democrat does it, he'll just kind of shrug it off.
Oh, okay.
So I don't like that.
Okay. Do you like your people more objective?
I do. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like for me, my personal philosophy, or my personal policy, I guess you could say, can basically be summed up in a quote by Leon Trotsky, where he says, "The ends can justify the means so long as there's something to justify the ends." Right.
Okay.
So it doesn't. So if you have to do something kind of scuzzy along the way to get to the end, it can be justified so long as your end goal is good, right?
Right.
Like if your end goal is like a fucking ethno state or whatever the alt-right wants, okay, no.
Right.
You're just piling on at that point. You've got a shit end goal and you've got, a shitty way of achieving it, right?
Right.
But, if your goal is to stamp out the alt-right and neo-Nazis or whatever, and, I'm not going to go out there and judge you or whatever because you punch somebody, right? The ends can justify the means in that way.
Sure. That makes sense.
So I'm not going to say, like, oh, he has to stick to this very, principled code of, a principle and morals or whatever like that. But he has to have something, right?
Sure, of course.
And for him, it's just like, with, it's just, there's a lot of hypocrisy in it. His morals are basically, if the Democrats do it, they can get away with it. If the Republicans do it, he's gonna blast them, right?
Yeah, he's two-faced.
Yeah. I mean, he during the Boston bombings, in one segment he's talking about how, when they tried to corner the Zarnev brother or whatever, he's talking about how, the police were shooting up this one boat or whatever, and they got way out of hand.
Yeah.
And then in the next segment, not in the same night, but on a different segment, like during the show, like at a different different time during the show.
Right.
This other lady chimes in. He goes, "I think we should really commend our Boston police officers for this restraint that they showed or whatever." And he's going, "You're like, yes. It's like 15 minutes ago you were talking about how they had like this thing called contagious fire and they were losing control. They were going ape shit. They shot the place up all to hell or whatever."
Yeah.
And then like 20 minutes later, you're like, "Yes, they acted with such restraint." And then he's got another thing where he's like. He literally said, he's like, I trust Obama with the drone strike program. But Sarah Palin, don't trust her. Like, I don't trust Sarah Palin either. Right.
Sure.
But, let's not forget that during the Obama administration, he assassinated an American citizen with no trial. Right. This was Anwar al-Awlaki, and then also killed his son, who was a minor, right, with no trial. And
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Okay. So I think it was in 2011, there was a drone strike carried out in Yemen where there was an American Muslim named Anwar al-Awlaki who, after 9/11, he was saying, look, he was trying to promote Muslim-American relations, like Muslim Americans to relate to other, Americans, right?
Sure.
Say, look, we're going to face a lot of hate, a lot of backlash as a result of this. But we cannot succumb to, just being basically jihadis, because that's not going to solve anything.
Right.
We've got to develop a network of solidarity.
Right.
We've got to, integrate into American society, show them that we are not, extremists or whatever, that we are people who just want to be like them.
Right. So that didn't work out and he moved to Yemen, or he was visiting, or what?
Well, the drone strike program, when it picked up in 2007 under Bush, and then especially when it started to just really skyrocket under Obama, he saw the effects of that hitting I don't remember. I think he was from Yemen originally.
Okay.
But when they started coming down on Yemen, he went over there and said, hey, I know I said all these things about, trying to integrate with the Americans after 9/11, but, here they are 10 years later and they're just, bombing the shit out of us.
Right.
And so that is a kind of a natural reaction. I mean, of course, he kind of went about it, and I guess you could say, I'm not going to stand up here and say, yeah, I agree with everything he said, because I think he came off as an Islamist, right?
Sure. But I mean, can you put him at fault though?
I can't, right? I mean, if you're going to say, okay, yeah, the Americans are the infidel, or like, yeah, if someone was bombing me from fucking Nevada,
right. I'd say fuck the Nevada.
Yeah, I'd say fuck them,
Yeah.
Fuck them. It's an asshole move to do, and you're killing people in my country, right?
Exactly.
In my fucking backyard.
Right.
That's not all right,
Yeah.
And so he became a little bit more radical.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you can bring him back to the United States, extradite him or whatever, hold him on trial, maybe put him in prison or whatever. But no. Instead, what they decided to do was fly a drone over his house and then bomb him and kill him.
Wow.
With no trial.
Wow.
And then they went after his son,
Uh-huh.
who was 16.
And he was in Yemen?
Yeah, he was in Yemen. So this didn't happen on U.S. soil, but they were U.S. citizens. That's, yeah.
Sure.
Well, they have U.S. citizenship.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha.
So, yeah.
Sorry, I didn't know that.
No, yeah. So, and, I mean, Bill Maher did mention this. He's like, but I don't remember exactly what he had to say, but
because Obama did it, he was just like,
yeah, Obama, he's just like, okay, I trust Obama with the drone strike program, but
yeah.
I mean, again, I don't trust Sarah Palin with it either. I think Sarah Palin's a fucking nut job, but, Obama assassinated an American citizen with no trial, and then a minor with no trial.
Wow.
And then bombed a wedding or whatever. It's like, look, just because he's not a fucking meth head at the helm of this Predator drone, doesn't mean that he's still good, right?
Right.
So that was one of my things with Bill Maher, is that it was just, he lets the Democrats get away with it.
Oh, okay, interesting.
So,
all right. Well, actually, I think this is pretty decent. I know we didn't get to cover Venezuela, but Monday, I'll write a note and we can talk about it Monday, just because we are almost at 2.5 hours, and yeah.
And I gotta go.
Yeah, too, okay. So, yeah. Well, so I think this is after your tangent and telling how shitty Bill Maher is and how everyone should stop listening to him.
This is you should listen to me only. Yeah. This is a good place to stop.
Yeah. So, but yeah, if on Monday, if you want to bring topics and stuff like that, I'll definitely write down Venezuela. At least that was the only thing that you mentioned here. But I really appreciate you sitting down with me and having this conversation.
I appreciate you bringing me in.
Yeah, I feel like I learned a lot, especially because I know we kind of talked about the alternate history, but I don't think you've really fully fleshed it out for me, and I really appreciate hearing that. So,
thank you for bringing me on, and I hope to see you Monday.
Yeah, we'll definitely have it, and then I have no idea how it's going to be with all 4 people. I don't, because I think with the three of us, it wasn't that chaotic, but I kind of want it to be more chaotic because I think that would be a little more fun. So, but we'll see how it is.
I don't know what people are going to be saying about Venezuela on Monday. Maybe we can skip that one. I mean,
no, I mean, Blake is very much into debate and conversation and foreign affairs and stuff like that, and just global events. Same with Zach. I think everyone would at least be able to chime in, give an opinion or something like that. So,
all right,
it's definitely I know.
It's not going to be just me ranting with everybody else sitting there silently twiddling their thumbs.
And I mean, even if it is, you spend 10 minutes talking about it, that's fine. Yeah. Like, again, I don't know. I think you have a pretty good, at least personally, I think that you have a pretty good stage presence, and you know how to, expand on thoughts, and I think you can follow through. And gee, I wonder where that came from. Extemporaneous speaking from debate, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, man, I'm the guy who watched C-SPAN. It's boring as shit, and it's drier than a dick with no lube. But
yeah, and that's a great note to end. Dick with no lube.
Next time,
Dick with no lube.
Is that going to be the new podcast name?
No, it's not. We're doing one more podcast. That's I've branded it. I'm not changing it until because I can't keep changing the name.
Yeah, just the tip podcast.
Just the tip. Dick with no lube. One more podcast, just the girl things, something like that. But yeah, dude, I have to use the restroom so bad right now. So I really appreciate everyone tuning in. Hopefully we've made it to the end. If not, then you guys are horrible, and I don't want you to listen to my I'm just kidding. But yeah, really appreciate it. That was the conclusion of episode 2. I don't know how much of this information will go into episode 2. I might need to cut it just to keep the hour frame, but who knows? We'll have a 2-part special or something like that. Maybe do a mini series. We could do a mini series, 20-minute sessions. Me and you.
Talks with John. Fireside chats.
Fireside chat with John.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
again.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just gonna say my little sign off. Thank you very much for having me on, and thank you for listening.
Yeah, I appreciate it, guys. You have a wonderful day. Peace.